Thank you. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Narragansett Planning Board to order Tuesday, March 20th, 21st, sorry. Tuesday, March 21st, 2023. Mr. Friday.
Here.
Mr. Brunetto.
Here.
Mr. Brady.
Here.
Dr. O'Neill.
Here.
Mr. Fleming, I'm here. There's some things we need to talk about first, folks. The most important at this point is the live streaming of the meeting. The town council had decreed that planning and zoning board meetings will be on YouTube from this point forward. We've got the system set up. There's a camera here. There's a camera in the back. Mr. Holland's here to work the camera tonight, but what we're going to do, because this is the way it's going to be going forward, we're going to put that camera on the podium with the back in the presentation in the screen, and it's going to stay on that, right? Were you able to work the picture-in-picture?
Yes.
Oh,
Yep, you will appear on the lower right-hand corner of the screen.
that camera is going to show us on a picture-in-picture in the lower right-hand screen, okay? And that's where it's going to sit. Unlike the council that pans back and forth, it's just going to sit that way for the whole meeting. I've been advised by more than one person that these microphones are extremely sensitive. And so I'm asking the board, sidebar conversations are going to get picked up, and you may not like what gets picked up, so please don't. And folks out there, please don't have conversations with yourself, because it's going to disturb the transmission, and people at home they're not going to be able to hear the speaker. So be patient with us. This is the first time, and then zoning's going to be next, and we're supposed to do this going forward forever, or until decreed by another council not to do it. That's where we are, so I appreciate that. The next item on, I do want to welcome back Mr. Marcello.
Thank you.
We bid farewell to him last meeting due to some completely unexplainable action by 3 members of the council that never took place. So we thought we had lost him, and now he's back. And we're happy about that. Good thing we didn't give you any gifts, Steve. You have to be returning. So that's great. So Mr. Marcello is back. Next is the election of Secretary of the Planning Board. A member who was not reappointed was the Secretary, so we need to appoint someone. Is there any nominees for Secretary? Or actually, are there any volunteers for Secretary?
Volunteer? Oh, I'll volunteer.
Mr. Brunetto
I
will
would
volunteer.
second tier as volunteer.
No, why don't you nominate him then, Mr.
I would nominate Mr. Bonetto, Secretary of the Planning Board.
So I have a nomination for Jerry Brunetto for Secretary, by Mr. Brady, seconded by Dr. O'Neill. All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0, thank you. And next is an appointment to the Coastal Access Improvement Committee. Joe, did you have a nomination?
I would nominate the good Mr. Brady.
Thank you. I would accept that nomination.
And I'll second.
So I have a nomination by Dr. O'Neill and a second by Mr. Brunetto for Mr. Brady. And you do want to do it, Mr. Brady?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. And then there's an ad hoc affordable housing subcommittee. The Affordable Housing Committee would like to create
A consortium.
with us 2 members of their board and 2 members of the planning board to discuss issues relative to affordable housing and to work up whatever with you and then bring it back to the boards. So who is interested in serving on that?
I'm interested.
Mr. Friday would be interested.
I would be interested. in
You would
that.
also be interested?
Yes.
Okay.
Do we know the time commitment on this? It depends, or?
It's kind of in its initial phases. I can't say exactly what the time commitment would be, Doctor, because what they've projected out for right now is to look at 2 potential ordinances, subject areas that have been discussed here many times: mixed-use development and accessory dwelling units. It could go further. But at the moment, those are the two targets that they have in mind. I believe that committee, the Affordable Housing Collaborative, is anticipating a couple or 3 meetings on each of those, and it would be at the call of the individuals. That wouldn't have to be on any particular schedule, 3rd Tuesday of the month or anything like that. So it will be a few months of commitment anyway, but it's not intended to be continuous.
So, do you want to nominate Mr. Burnett or Mr. Friday?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks, folks. Now, next is the consent agenda. There's 2 sets of minutes, January 24th and February 15th of 2023. Does anyone have any comments or additions or corrections? And I would note that Mr. Brady
Yeah, we
cannot
have-
vote on the second.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we have to split the vote on these.
Yep.
Unless anybody has any corrections? On the first one, January 24th. Move
I
that
can't vote on
positively.
the first one.
I'm sorry?
I can't vote on the first one.
Right.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
Okay.
Okay. So, Joe, are you moving the first one?
Move the first one, yeah.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0, 1 abstention. And then on the second set of minutes, which is February 15th.
I didn't see anything to be corrected there. Does anybody else?
Looks good to me.
Move the minutes then of positively of February 15th.
I'll second.
It's motion by Dr. O'Neill, second by Mr. Friday. All those in favor?
Aye.
4-0 and 1 abstention. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to the regular agenda. First site review is Haggerty, Plat C, Lot 344-8, 85 Narragansett Avenue. Mr. McGreen, I presume Mr. McGreen's in the camera, Dan?
He is now.
He is now.
Folks.
Okay,
Chairman,
go ahead.
so the applicant and owners are Chris and Chelsea Haggerty. Property presently is a legal non-conforming rooming house, and the applicant desires to convert the rooming house to a 2-family duplex, which is a permitted use. However, the requirements and the dimensional ordinance requires 20,000 square feet, and the front is supposed to be 25 feet of setback, and the side yard is 10 feet, and the frontage is 150 feet. So we set forth in our application, we're looking for relief of 13,766 square feet of relief for the square footage of the lot, 115 feet of relief on the frontage, and 9.4 feet off the front. That being said, we're not doing anything to the structure. We're just converting it from a rooming house to a 2-family. Also, as part of that conversion, we agreed to remove the kitchen from the 3rd floor. There was a kitchen that was put in there without a building permit. My clients knew that when they bought it, and so they applied for an application to convert this thing to a duplex rather than keeping it as a rooming house. And they've agreed to remove the kitchen on the 3rd floor and also to add a door. I spoke to Jill about that. We initially, on the plans that we marked up, we said the 2nd floor, but I think it would make more sense to put the door on the 1st floor rather than the 2nd floor. Do you have that, Jill? Do you have the one I wrote on?
No, I don't have the marked up one,
Okay.
because some of the markups were not still relevant.
Yes, so right here, right here. So we were thinking about putting a door here to separate the 1st floor from the 2nd and 3rd floor. So the 2nd and 3rd floor would be one unit, and the 1st floor would be a separate unit. Other than that, we're not proposing to make any other changes to the building, and obviously we'll be subject to getting a building permit, inspections from the town inspector, I said, removing that third floor kitchen and putting on that second floor, that first floor door. That being said, if the board has any questions for my clients, they're here to speak.
So, you're Mr. Aggie?
I am, yes.
So, Jill, or Jack, this was a rooming house for a long time.
Yes,
And then it was illegally converted, not by this owner, by a previous owner.
Yeah,
Don't worry,
someone
don't
put
worry.
a third room up.
Illegal to a 3-unit,
3 units, correct.
and the town wasn't aware of that.
Right,
So now he wants to make it 2 units.
right.
Okay.
Which is, like I said, is a permitted use.
It just requires variance on the lot
Right.
coverage and the frontage.
Exactly.
Right.
Just-
So the other permitted uses for this property are rooming house by right, and a single-family home, which would also require relief on the lot coverage, but not as much as a duplex, but still relief.
yes. So in an R10 zone, the minimum lot area requirement is
10,000.
10,000. For a duplex, it's 20.
Right. So that would require relief.
We're not-
Go
We're not
ahead.
increasing the bedroom count, so there will be, I think, three bedrooms on the first floor and 4 bedrooms on the second and third.
Well, I wanted to get to that.
Yeah.
It looks like it looks like it was 5 bedrooms as a rooming house. And then when the person illegally converted it to 3 units, they made 7 bedrooms. So this thing historically, going back maybe 100 years, was 5 rooms. So
That's my best guess as well,
Yeah.
because there's 5 bedrooms on the first and second floor, the third would add 2. So the 5-bedroom boarding house was likely just the first and second until the previous owners added that third.
I think that's what it is. So I just had 2 concerns about this, not so much the relief of the square footage, I understand you're not changing the building, but I'm not sure that the 7 bedrooms make sense when historically it's been 5. And the other thing is, I would like to see plans that lay out exactly what the two units look like. It looks like this was taken, the 3 units, and then we marked up a plan, right?
Right, because we're trying to stay on the agenda, and we initially were looking for actually 3 units. And then 3 units requires a special use permit, and then we run into the infamous Newton case, which
Use variance.
use variance, right, and so that's why we dropped down to the request for the 2 units.
So those are my 2 issues, the number of bedrooms and you have adequate parking for either 5 or 7 bedrooms, Jill?
Yes, there are 7 spaces.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments, Joe?
Yeah, 2 things. First of all, if something's done illegally in town, we have an opportunity to correct it. We should correct it. So I can't support 7 bedrooms, I mean, 5 is it. The other thing is, can you describe the exit plan here when the fire breaks out?
Describe the
I
what?
only see one stairway, you know.
The
Yeah.
exterior of the house does have a, like a metal egress ladder that goes down to the, oh, sure.
Can you
I
bring
can
that
try to show
other,
you. So these back bedrooms are only on the first floor, and this is a second floor shot. So this is roof right here. And this window is an egress, or this is a bigger window, so I think it's the point of egress right here. And then the third floor has a window in this location, just 1 floor up, and that has an exterior ladder that goes down. Now, we did in front of the historic district ask if we would we got approval to add a ladder to the back from the second floor roof down to ground level. So we are prepared, at least through the historic district, to add another ladder to get down from that, I guess you would call it a first floor roof, down to the first floor. But the third floor has access to the first floor roof.
Have you put that plan that you have in mind before our fire commissioner there, or fire chief?
Correct me if I'm wrong, at least on the online application, the fire part seems to be like after these ones. I don't know the actual process, but that's what it seemed like, that it comes next.
Yeah, however you move forward, I certainly would request that and make sure that that's clearly planned. Well, you only need it once.
At the-
Disaster if it's not well planned.
Even though they didn't get any approvals for the third floor, at least they put the ladder down.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
That it, Joe? That's it? Mark, anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, adjacent use on, looking at the building on the left is an inn, and then on the right is a new inn and a restaurant. So I think two-family is consistent with the environment. I really have a problem. So we have, on the first floor, there's 3 bedrooms, very delineated, kitchen, living room. On the second floor, there's a living room, a kitchen, dining area, a master bedroom, and a bedroom, and the stairs go upstairs to the 3rd floor. And this is where I have a problem. Okay,
Third
so this is
floor?
the 3rd floor.
No, you go to,
That's
That is.
that's the 3rd floor.
here's a stair.
So you have bedroom, bedroom, this is a living room, which under the pheasant, going to a two-family, this is a logical bedroom. And this is still a finished area. So just taking the stove out logically makes that another bedroom. So, I mean, if we have parking for it, and this is what, I mean, to me, if it's a duck, let's call it a duck, you know, and so I have a problem really defining this as what is being brought here for, because I see 4 bedrooms here. You know, and again, it goes back to a lineage of decision-making here is like, understand what you intend. I gotta look to the next owner. And what do they intend? You know, and in fact, you know, if they're big enough, you get 2 people in each room. So now we got a big problem. So, you know, I don't know where that leaves us, but I can't get past that. And I've been trying to get past
Isn't
that.
that an enforcement issue? I mean, that's always an issue with everyone's house.
Yeah.
You have a living room, you can convert it to a bedroom. I mean, in this instance, one of the concerns about having an extra bedroom is if they were connected to a septic system. In this case, we actually got, when we were going for the 3-family, we actually got permission for the 3-family sewer connection. So this is sewer, and we did have permission for all of those bedrooms. They didn't have a problem with it. But that being said, we're looking for a 2-unit, not a 3-unit.
I understand that.
I mean, we can't, I mean, what are we gonna do? We can't fill in with cement. I mean, it's the space is existing. So like I said, I understand your concern, but from, it is sewered, and we don't intend, we're agreeing, and it's an enforcement issue. I mean, just like that 3rd floor was an enforcement issue, and, you know.
So you just made my point.
No, I know, I
Figure it out, but-
understand, again, but I'm making my point.
I know,
because it's an enforcement
I
issue.
understand. To me, this is more bedrooms than what we're really discussing, but.
But historically, it was 5 bedrooms.
Historically, it was
I think-
5 bedrooms,
I think we know
correct.
that.
Yes.
It wasn't 7, it was 5.
I believe the
There's
last.
a significant amount of relief required
Yeah.
for a 2-unit, which I don't have a problem with a 2-unit. Actually, come in under a comp permit, you could have less obstacles. You know, if one of them was deed restricted, that'd be easier to get that density bonus, but whatever. So that's, you know, that's what I am too. Jerry,
Okay.
you?
I'd like to see the layout, proposed layout. This is all existing, right?
I think it's important to see the 2 actually sketched out as it's gonna be, the 2 units. But we're still having trouble getting by the number of bedrooms, I think. Because the gentleman wants 7. He wants 4 and 3. Mr. Friday, do you have anything?
No, I have the same perspective on the bedrooms. I guess the other thing that I had a question about is, I think the parking lot that's sketched versus the parking lot that's existing. I think there's some area that's not parking lot that's shown as parking lot.
Where's?
Along the back lot line. Looks to me like there's an area that it's, I don't know if it's vegetated, it's not paved.
Correct. He's correct. There's kind of a gravel area in the back there that does have a a tree that blew over a couple months ago. I cleared that. We didn't want to take any action until we got approval, because even that area might be subject to, wetlands or something like that. So that's more of a proposed plan that we would, undertake if everything went well otherwise. But yeah, it's an old home. It's a lot of home. It's just on a really small plot.
Right, it's a nice place, I mean,
Yep.
and again, as long as I've known it, it's been a rooming house, but no one was aware of the conversion.
Oh, yeah.
And again, like my position is, the 2 units seem fine. I just think the number of bedrooms need to come back to 5. But you're gonna be, the decision here is gonna be advisory to the zoning board anyhow. What's the relief that's actually being requested? Just the lot coverage, and the setbacks, right?
No,
And frontage.
Yeah, front setback and.
Yeah, dimensional relief.
Dimensional,
Yep.
But the set, yeah.
correct. So it's the lot area, the lot width, and the front yard setback.
Yeah, no parking, nothing else. So, we need to make well, let me see if, do you have anything else, Mr. McGree?
No.
At this point? Let me see, the public, anyone in the public have a comment on this? None? No one in the public, thank you. So folks, what's your pleasure, based on what we've said? Anybody? Well, we need 2 motions. One on comprehensive, but then, excuse me, Joe, the other thing is, do we want the applicant to come back with defined plans, or do we want to continue it, or do we want to make a recommendation now and go to zoning? When are you scheduled for zoning?
You should decide that first.
Probably next month, I'm assuming.
Next month.
This project will go next month, April 20th.
So I have no doubt that he could come back with specific plans. The question is if he wants to stay with his configuration of 7 bedrooms, then he's gonna come back with plans with 7
You
bedrooms.
follow that, because
Yeah.
if you're going,
I was just gonna ask, if it's 2-family 5-bedroom or 2-family 7-bedroom, are we subject to the same 20,000 square foot lot in front? So it's the same standard whether we go for the 5 or the 7?
The relief is, right, it's a duplex based on 20,000 square feet. That's the relief in the front yard setback.
Mhm.
Our concern is just about the density that used to be there. And I appreciate your point about sewers, you're absolutely right, and there's plenty of parking. So it's not the end of the world in that sense, but the density for 100 years was 5 bedrooms and now it's 7, so. So,
I think the use is consistent with the adjacent. I think, we've talked about the setbacks and the floor plan. I mean, I'm more comfortable with a 5-bedroom than I am a 7-bedroom. The reality is, it could easily be used for 7-bedroom, but that's beyond our.
We're here to try to.
Well, I
to be on the
appreciate
right
that.
side of
Appreciate that.
things.
So-
As I said, we look to the next guy.
let me
It's always
ask-
the next
let
guy.
me ask
We're
Mr.
the
Marcel.
next guy, unfortunately, in this
You
You
case.
can approve it
Yeah.
conditional
You
on
could-
5 bedrooms.
Correct, and then it would be up
Yeah.
to,
We could approve the relief required
With a recommendation.
with the recommendation is
Recommendation.
5 bedrooms,
Five
and then you can take your case.
to zoning,
To
and they
zoning.
could either keep it the way it
Well,
is.
I appreciate the fallback at least. Thank you.
Or, and the other condition would be to present a refined
Right.
floor plan to zoning that actually shows what you're proposing, not what was there with the 3 units crossed out. So,
Because the relief won't change.
so does that make sense from, it sounds like the board's on the same page with all that, so.
You can't erase a room that's there.
Well, we will. If there's to do. We're like again, we're trying to be on the right side of things here.
So the first motion would be
Yeah,
relative
so-
to the comp plan.
yeah, we'll move the application before us, Haggerty Tax Assessor Plat C, Lot 344A, is complete and conforms to town comprehensive plan.
Seconded.
That's a motion by Dr. Neal on completeness and conformity with the comp plan, seconded by Mr. Brady. All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. And then the motion itself, Does anybody want to take a shot?
Doc, you wanna run that? Okay. All right, I would move Haggerty, Tax Assessors Plat C, Lot 334A, with a recommendation of 5 bedrooms, and that a actual floor plan, designated floor plan, accompany the proposal to the zoning board.
But you're moving favorably on the relief
Favorably on the
request
relief, yes.
of square footage and.
With the condition.
With
With
the
the
conditions,
conditions.
with those 2 conditions.
Mike?
Staff had 3 conditions in their memo.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Did you double check Jill's memo?
Did you see him, Mr. McGreen? Are you okay with the conditions?
Agree with it.
Was there an issue with the easement, or was that removed? I can't.
Actually, she got ahead of us, that it'd be approved with the limitation of 7 bedrooms total.
Right, so you would be changing number 2.
So they're changing number 2. So, again, approved dimensional relief, and include 1, 2, and 3 on page 2 of 4, the recommendations. The prior to issuance of building permit or certificate of occupancy, the floor plans are revised and submitted to the building inspector for review and approval, that the project is limited to 7 bedrooms in total, that this approval...
So 5.
5, excuse me. Yeah. Oh, excuse me.
You weren't getting out with that one.
Moving a little quick. Sorry. That this approval is in conformance with site plan. Once a certification of occupancy has been issued, this project shall be considered complete. Any future building permit applications do not otherwise require zoning relief shall not be required to seek an addendum to this condition.
You okay with those, Mr. McGreen?
Yes.
Okay, that's a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Brady, second by Dr. Neal. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, good luck.
Good luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Just in time.
Okay, I've been informed by someone who's watching that the board is a little muted in their commentary and maybe should speak up a little. I think I was excluded from that comment. Probably you guys.
I think this is the first time this board has ever been accused of being muted.
Right.
So,
Well,
wait a minute, one at a time. Go ahead.
it's nice we're interested in the viewers at home, but can you hear us in the back? You
Okay.
have the time to come here, you can. Okay. Thank you. Because sometimes we, no, drop on this. Okay.
Okay. Next item is the Grant Family Trust, Plat I-J, Lot 64 to 27, 1137 Succotash Road. Mr. Darby.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you for hearing me, members of the board. We're here on the Grant Family Trust property. It's located within the Kenyon Condominium Association. This is a request to demolish the existing dwelling. On the summary on the first page it says, and also an accessory structure, but that's not in the plan. If you look down on the proposed improvements, they do reference that we will be maintaining the garage that is out there as well, and it's shown on the plans as well as intact. This is to construct a 2-bedroom, single-family dwelling. Because we are in the coastal area, we're going to need relief. I think it's a pretty straightforward application. It's a non-conforming structure. It's in a BC zone, so we have to come here for quite a bit of relief to make sure that we conform with the development standards that are contained in the ordinance. We are allowed to, with relief, to seek up to 25% increase in the size of the structure in the footprint. The existing lot coverage right now is 27.7%. 1,614 feet. The lot itself is a condominium lot, and it is a total of 5,821 square feet. So we're dealing with a very small-sized area in which to do this. There are some constraints in there. If you look, and Mr. Balch will go into this in detail. I'm sure you don't want to hear it from me and from him, so I'm just going to give you a little synopsis and overview, and have him get into nitty-gritty details. We are constrained due to some of these septic systems that are on-site wastewater treatment systems that are out there, and the water lines that are running adjacent to it. There is another water line that services the property to the south. I believe that's the south. That's going to get relocated coming in from the east, and we're going to maintain the water line up near the existing garage. We're seeking relief from DM also to bring it to the outside of the garage. But some of the constraints that we have are the distances between the on-site wastewater treatment systems and the water lines and the buildings themselves. So because of the relief, we are in the coastal area. We agree with what relief obviously is requested here and was identified in the staff report. And insofar as the conditions are concerned, we think that they're pretty straightforward and reasonable. And I would ask Mr. Balch to come up here and give you the details and specifics of how this was designed and what the constraints of the property were. If you have any questions for me prior to turning over to Mr. Balch, I'd be happy to answer.
All set?
Okay.
My name is Jeff Balch. I'm a land surveyor here in Wakefield. You'll have to excuse, I have a former cold that's closing itself out. As Patrick had mentioned, the lot is fairly small. It's a condominium lot, so the overall parcel is fairly large because of all the different condominium lots. This application was submitted prior to the change in the bulk zoning ordinance, so things like the FAR did not apply here. They do now, but they didn't at the time the initial application was submitted.
Excuse me, Mr.
Yep.
Balch, I just want to clarify, we closed that particular aspect of the ordinance upon our one-year review. The original bulk zoning did not contemplate lots within a condos
Right.
lot, and so in this case.
Correct, that wasn't the original one, it was the.
Right, this is a 400,000 square foot lot,
Right.
so it wasn't subject to FAR.
Right.
But we closed that and the council passed an amendment, so now anything under 20,000 in a condo property,
Would
the
be
building
included.
envelope would be subject to the FAR.
Correct.
This application came in prior to the council changing yours,
Correct.
correct? Okay, so,
So, in the upper left-hand corner, first off, north is straight up on the sheet, just if there's references to any directions. In the upper left-hand corner, there is a black outline with a crosshatched area. That's an existing garage. That garage was formerly a two-car garage and then extended onto the lot to my left. And the budding owner tore down their half. Initially, when we submitted the application, we were going to tear that down and we were going to include that building area as part of the proposed changes we were doing for this footprint. And during the process, we determined, we were informed that we have to limit our 25% increase to the single structure only. We can't demolish one structure and count that towards the next one. So we further reduced the building to keep it at just 25% increase of what the existing footprint is. The existing footprint is shown in that black, right in here you can see some black lines. That's the existing house, and the red area is the proposed house. We kept it, as I said, under 25% maximum for the enlargement, and we've also designed a new denitrification OWTS system. It's in the upper right-hand corner. You can kind of see that brown reddish square. And the original system was designed, the original house was 2 bedrooms. The proposed house is 2 bedrooms. And we're not increasing the number of bedrooms for this structure. We are replacing an existing cesspool in the property. Essentially, here's the final footprint. We've been back and forth with the planning department several times in terms of trying to square up the square footage that we're allowed and what is being counted towards our base square footage for our increase. Excuse me. Essentially, it's a simple tear down and rebuild. Again, the house is not being enlarged more than 25%. The new system is being proposed. The driveway is essentially in the same general area, and we're keeping the detached garage. Oh, and we are relocating a couple of water lines, one of which goes through this property to the lot to the rear, to another lot, abutting lot. We've talked to the abutting owner, and we've made arrangements with them to pay the cost of relocating their water line directly off of Percy Lane. That's essentially the crux of it.
Okay. Joe?
Yeah, not to get too deep into the sewage and the things, but the word cesspool that you use, has that been there 30 years, 40 years?
I'm assuming, I have no history on it.
So,
It's probably there at least 40 years, if not 50 years. It has to be there before 1969.
so you know it failed long ago, right? And you're obviously going to put a modern
Correct.
system, the treatment on-site system. Let me ask you a couple.
Yeah, go ahead,
Joe.
Yep.
Are you going to put water up to that third level? For any reason?
No. No water on the third.
This is Maggie Grant, she's a trustee of the Grant.
She may need to come up
Yeah,
and
just so
and
they
stand at
can
the
hear
podium
you.
so people can see you. You can stand with Jeff if you want, ma'am.
Yeah, there's no water on the third floor.
And what's the height of the third floor in terms of ceiling?
I don't think, honestly, I don't think the plans have been developed that far, because we were waiting to see what the zoning approvals were going to do for this. We've got some conceptual plans that were done by an architect. He's not here tonight, he's out of the country. So I can't speak to how high it's going to be, but I would assume it's going to be probably a standard height.
But it wouldn't go over the height limit.
No, it
You
can't
need
go
back
over
here.
the height.
Certainly not, we're
We're not
restricted
seeking-
to 35 feet for the total.
I'm not talking about the outside of the house, I'm talking about the inside. So the attic area, if you were on town sewers, I wouldn't even bring this up. But if you're having average height of ceilings on that third level, as my companion here said, it's not you, it's the next owner we worry about. The potential is to easily have 2 more bedrooms there. So my thought would be, if you lower the ceiling height, not the outside of the house, as I said, that's not, as long as it's not more than 35 feet, that's irrelevant. But if you lower that ceiling height, that would eliminate the potential for usage, at least comfortably, for anything other than storage. But that's a suggestion. The other question is, do you already have the letter from the Kenyon Association?
Yes.
You do, okay. So those are my questions.
And what will the septic system be for? How many bedrooms?
2.
2. And that'll be it.
We tried for 3, couldn't get it.
Couldn't get it. Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Brady?
Yeah, I just had a question, and I understand this falls under the whole condo regs, so I may have missed something, but this is, we're also looking for relief as a non-conforming use because this was a business zone?
No, it's a
It's a
BC business zone.
It's a BC zone.
But there's no businesses.
But it's
on
never,
it.
my question was, has this ever been a business? And I don't think, I mean,
No.
as long as I've lived here, I've driven by there, I've never remember a business.
Yeah,
but I
so
just-
it was the state's, it was the town's desire to make this commercial on the other side
Outside.
of Galilee, and it just never.
Gotcha, okay. That's what I suspected, but I want to clarify. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brunetto.
I have nothing to add.
Mr. Fry.
So my question was about the third floor, how it's not a bedroom. And I guess the definition for bedroom was adopted after this came in.
Mike,
There's
or Joe?
There's a definition for bedroom that would
No,
say that
we-
this is a bedroom.
The original FAR bulk regulation referenced the building code. And the building code states that living space has to be 7 feet high or higher. So that regulation will be in play. And the other aspect for bedrooms is they have to be 70 square feet or more. That's only 7 by 10. So those are pretty good spaces up there. That minimum would be met. So it does lend some credence to your concern, Mr. Fry, that, could that attic space be used for bedroom? If it's less than 7 feet high, then the building official will look at it as storage only and will issue a permit anticipating that it is only storage only. If it's used for bedroom space, maybe not by these folks, someone else in the future, that would be a violation of the approval. But, you know, there's,
You have the recourse.
as the previous
issue.
gentleman said,
Once the room's built, it's built.
it's an enforcement issue.
Steve, or
Well,
Jill?
go ahead, Jill.
Well, I was just going to say that staff anticipated that, so condition number 5, should you accept it, references that the attic floor should not be used as an additional bedroom. And what that does is, it may not stop people from sleeping there up, you know, time again, but it does codify it, it does put it as it's reported, so in the future, it couldn't be advertised or sold as a third bedroom, as a 3-unit home.
And to add to that, given the fact that there's a 2-bedroom septic.
Yeah, that's what I was
Well,
gonna
that's
bring
why
up.
my concern.
Yeah, in other words, so that in and of itself would limit it. If they wanted to increase the bedrooms, they'd have to go back to DEM and try to get a 3-bedroom septic.
And you said you've already tried
They
that and
could
been
engineer.
rejected.
Yeah, we're prohibited from doing so because this is considered storm deposited sand and therefore fill material. And we have a water table, even though it's 8 feet deep, that's considered basically at the surface of the original ground.
And if someone wanted to not follow the rules,
They're not gonna follow the rules.
if it was 6 feet 11 and didn't even meet state building code, they could still put a bed up there and somebody could sleep there. I mean,
Mattresses.
there's just so many ways so we have a 2-bedroom septic and their prohibition that's codified, as Jill said, that it can't be a bedroom, then, you know,
And again, one of the things about this particular area too is the size of the lot and the crowding of the buildings around there. There's no parking
No.
to accommodate a 3rd bedroom, really. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's very tight over there. There's nothing that's freed up for space available to accommodate such a thing.
anything else, folks? Anyone in the public have a comment on this? No? When do you go to zoning?
Hopefully the 20th.
April 20th.
April 20th. And the conditions are okay as they're stated?
Yeah, they're very straightforward and they're all, common sense. I mean, regulatory and consent.
Ready to go?
Go ahead.
Okay, move the application before us, Grant Family Trust, tax assessor plat IJ, lot 6427, is complete and in conformance with town comprehensive plan.
Seconded.
Motion by Dr. Neal, second by Mr. Brady. All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. And the motion itself?
Go ahead, Doc.
This is easy.
Yeah, it is.
So, move the application before us, Grant Family Trust, tax assessor plat IJ, lot 6427, positively with the staff's comments, recommendations on the correspondence dated March 15th, 2023.
That'd be page 4 of 6. 1 through 7. Seconded.
Motion by Dr. Neal, second by Mr. Brady. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I didn't want to get into the fact that there's separate material that's coming from.
Moving right along.
Oh, we
dropped off.
Mr. Fleming, you reached double-digit viewers at 10, but now we dropped to 7.
Sorry.
I'm blaming Matt. Are you kidding?
Come on.
You're almost an influencer by now.
It actually is coming out pretty well. You got everything's up there, and the board who you can't make us out. But,
Do you count?
Which is
old guys. Well,
Oh, you count as a viewer?
it's only 6. Joe's gonna recuse.
All right.
So we'll wait till he steps out into the audience. So I'll call this Richards Plat A, Lot 114 and 115, Marble Road. Mr. Landry, you're back. Last time we were here, there were a number of outstanding issues, and I believe some of them at least, if not all of them, have been addressed. And then some may still have to go to CRMC or whatever, but if you want to kind of address where we were last time and what we got to do now.
Of course, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, members of the board. Attorney Matt Landry, on behalf of Steve and Nancy Richards. We were here in December, and you may recall we had a fairly lengthy presentation about CRMC permitting, state level permitting, wetland compensation areas. There was a lot of technical aspects of this project. I'm joined by Tom Principe, Principe Engineering. Karen Beck testified at length on those issues at the last meeting, so I'm not going to recap all the technical details. If there's specific questions, Tom certainly can comment on those. But to recap, this involves two lots, lots 114 and 115, off of Marble Road, which is a private, not a town public street. It's a paper street that has not been accepted formally by the town. And I went through some of the legal aspects regarding paper streets in the town. Generally speaking, when roads are platted on an old plat map and it's recorded, the intent is to dedicate it to the public for use of members that own property on that plat. In order for the town to formally accept that road as a town roadway, they have to do so by a resolution of the town council, or they can do so by paving it or maintaining it or doing some other overt act. And they've never done that. This is a wooded area, it's not developed, and it's clearly not listed as a public street. So for all intents and purposes, it's a private paper street, and the legal right to develop a paper street rests with the owners that abut the paper street. And you're allowed to improve that roadway so long as it does not inhibit or prohibit anyone else who has a right in that roadway to use it. Our original intent back in December when we submitted this application was to merge these two lots. My clients do own lots 116 and 117, and for reasons that Karen Beck had testified, this is an incredibly large wetland area, very wet area, and you really can't develop or do anything beyond what we're trying to do. You can't even really build a house on lot 115, which is why we're proposing to merge these two lots and construct just one single family home for Mr. Richards and his wife who are retired. My client has some health concerns and he'd like to build a house for his wife to live in for her years. In order to access this property, the only means of legal frontage here is to bring improvement or improve Marble Road up to the frontage of Mr. Richards' lot. In December, and with our original application, the intent was to make this a public street, to improve it to town standards with everything that's required by the town and the subdivision regulations, with the exception of the road width. We had gone through extensive conversations, even a member of Tom's office over a year ago, before I even got involved, had a number of discussions with the town engineering and staff. There was a meeting of the minds, and at the end of that meeting, it was understood that 16 feet, or at least our understanding was that 16 feet would be an appropriate width because of all the wetlands that are on this road. It's only going to serve one house. It's not going to serve a subdivision and multiple lots. Again, all the lots to the west are wet. You really can't expand Marble Road any longer beyond what we're doing without significant wetland alterations, which this also includes. And as you may recall, in December, there were a number of concerns related to engineering, fire, and the DPW standards. The subdivision regulations require an 18-foot wide public right-of-way in order to make it a public street. We kind of went back and forth on that. This was really designed in conjunction with comments that we received from staff over a year ago, and we really couldn't get any headway since December. So Tom and our team has worked with Mr. Lawless and staff to develop a resolution here on how to resolve some of those concerns. So what we're proposing to do is maintain 16 feet, keep it at 16 feet. do the wetland compensation area, and instead of extending Marble Road 160 feet by 16 feet wide, we've actually reduced the length of the road to exactly 150 feet and maintaining the 16-foot road width. The reason for the 150 feet is anything beyond it requires a hammerhead turnaround and approval by the fire marshal. And my understanding is that he's signed off on this and agrees that we don't need any hammerhead or turn radius. To the extent one would be needed, we have this driveway that comes in, there is a turnaround parking area here. But for purposes of fire turnaround and turn fire apparatus radius, if it's not beyond 150 feet, we're not required to do that. So we've eliminated that portion of the application. We're maintaining 16 feet because that's what originally was discussed for safety purposes, for fire apparatus, general purposes, even if it's a private road. If it was private, we could potentially make this a 12-foot private driveway that comes in to access Mr. Richards Road. With Tom's expertise and consultation with Mr. Lawless, we maintained 16 feet for all the same reasons that have already been discussed. But the purposes of this application going forward now is this is going to be a private road. We eliminate any of the concerns with making this a public street, eliminate the issues with the fire apparatus turnaround, maintain the 16 feet for all the reasons we've already discussed. But for maintenance purposes, obviously the town is concerned over who's going to maintain this road, who's going to plow it, who's going to be in charge of making sure that there's safe and adequate egress and ingress and whatnot. So you can see Mr. Lawless wrote 2 memos to staff and to the applicant in regards to the road development portion of this, which will come at a later stage, and also the road frontage concerns here. The applicant is going to be required to submit an operation and maintenance plan to the town for approval before any permits are given for the construction of this roadway. We have no objection to that. I think it's a proposed condition from staff. We certainly have no opposition to that. That's a pretty standard requirement. That operation and maintenance manual will be drafted in conjunction with myself and Tom. It'll show who's responsible for it. There'll be sureties that'll likely need to be paid in advance for the improvements to ensure that they're done to the standards that engineering requests. But at this stage, the 2 memos that are dated late February to the applicant and to staff has given us a drainage approval, the supplementary drainage approval for these improvements, which was lacking at the last meeting, and that was a concern. So we have received that, and there's at least an acknowledgement as to approvals for this portion of the roadway. So long as it's in accordance with the plans, the sureties are submitted, and the proper permits are pulled for that roadway construction. Now, obviously, this is a pretty significant wetland compensation project. We've got Scott Rabideau, who's really the best in the business when it comes to wetlands. Tom's office has designed this in conjunction with his advice. It's been flagged. CRMC has verified the flagging. There's a preliminary determination on this. There was one aspect of the preliminary determination that I know staff raised a concern with, as whether or not this would require a special exception. There was some information missing with regards to what the proper setbacks and buffering setbacks were for CRMC purposes. Now this is at a state level. We're correcting those plans to show those, but the reviewer at the time did not have that available to him. But in consultation with Mr. Rabideau, we've reached out to, I think it was Mr. Feely, who is the biologist that verified this. We are not going to require a special exception to the extent this board needs to know that and staff needs to know that. We comply with the buffering and setbacks and all the standards that are required for the wetland compensation area. So that portion of it that staff had flagged, we don't anticipate an issue with that. It will need extensive relief from CRMC. It will need a variance of some extent for the wetland compensation. We're aware of that. There's plenty of standards. We have to show there's no alternative means. We've reduced any significant impacts to the extent possible. Obviously, this applicant has a right to build on this. It's a legally existing lot. This is a public platted, a platted right-of-way that he has a right to develop. and there's a variance procedure at the state level that we feel we can show we've complied with. The reduction from 160 feet to 150 feet also serves that purpose because it further reduces the impacts to the wetlands. And that was something I think Karen had spoken to in some detail at the last meeting. So really all that's before the board in the request for the advisory opinion to the board is with regard to the road frontage. As you know, every lot, buildable lot, needs access to a public roadway. The town has precedent for private roads and accesses to lots over paper streets. We're improving this to 16 feet, which is adequate, as discussed with engineering. We can't prohibit the public from using it or anyone that has a right in the plat to use it. We acknowledge that. We're not going to prohibit anybody. I'm not sure why anybody would need to access it, except maybe Mr. Kearney here in this lot. He has a right to access Marble Road, as does anybody that is along it. We don't anticipate any future development here because of the wetlands issues. Even if that were the case, everyone would have to come for extensive permitting both at this level and the state level. These lots are already developed, so it's really just a lot, single-family lot being developed. The other two lots that are not part of this application that my client owns are wet. He intends to pursue some type of conservation easement for those lots. There's no intent to build on them.
Mr. Landy, just gonna interrupt you, but there was a butter lot that I think the person accessed their property from a different spot.
That's
the one, it's not on the other, it's not on,
I know, this is a developed lot. I think Mr. Kearney or his attorney's here tonight, but he has his own driveway that comes into his property. But he does have a right to access Marble Road and may benefit from this. And, frankly, we can't prohibit him because he has a right to Marble Road.
And this
Below it, I believe,
is the condos,
It's
right?
condos,
So
yeah, there's
you would
condos
have,
there.
anyone in the condo association could access that.
This is the condo here. I'm
If
not
that's-
sure.
If that's common
So
area.
did we not set that land aside as open space when the condos were approved?
I believe that that lot, I think it's A132, has a conservation easement over it related to the construction of the condominiums on lot A129 CM.
Okay.
We researched that, as you might recall, some years ago when that condominium was proposed for expansion.
Okay.
I don't have that documentation with me, though.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Go ahead, Mr. Williams.
So I don't have a lot to add. I mean, it's a complicated access issue here, obviously, but these are platted lots. Anybody that has a legal lot of record has a right to access it, even if there's a request for relief. He's doing this at his expense. He's bringing it in. Tom's team has designed an appropriate wetland compensation area to replace these wetlands. These are all wetlands, this entire roadway, which is really why it's probably never been developed in the past. It's an extensive undertaking, but it is possible, with the right engineering, the right aspects. Tom can speak on the technical aspects if there's any questions, but one of the reasons why the wetland compensation area is here, because hydraulically, it needs to be connected to the wetland to ensure proper flow for that compensation area, and that's something the state will look at. That's well above my pay grade to explain, but generally speaking, that's why it's located in that area, because the wetland runs here and you need the wetlands to connect. Hydraulically, it could in theory be moved further north, but that's why it's located in the area that it is, and it's going to allow, actually the road's here, allow the road construction to come in.
So let me just, where's, maybe Jill or Matt, you can answer, where's the 3,900 square feet of wetland that's impacting the private road?
Right here, so the outline, I highlighted the wetland flagging right here in green. You can see it come all the way down. So, and what you see in red is the limit of disturbance area. So everything between the red and the green, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Prinsky, will be altered wetland. And then they're proposing a compensation area here.
So that's, in my terms, layman, it's a swap?
It's a swap.
So they're gonna go to the state, the CRMC, and request a filling in of that area Jill just outlined, and then create a wetland of similar size on the property.
Correct,
And
yeah.
there was a go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, no, I don't want to interrupt.
No, go ahead, but so there was a question last meeting as to whether
Yeah.
we can, because it's a wetland on a public road.
So,
Go ahead, Steve.
and did Mr. DeSisto ever get back to you?
He never did, unfortunately.
So, I emailed Mr. DeSisto, who's the attorney for CRMC. He didn't respond to me. Mr. Landry thought he was more important and tried it, and he didn't respond to him either. So, so what we essentially agreed on was that that issue is for coastal.
CRMC.
Coastal, and really the issue is the way the regulations are written, and stop me if I'm wrong, is that when you do a wetland swap, it says it's on the same lot.
Right.
And then the question becomes is, if the wetlands are on the street, and the street is a separate lot from the owner's lot, is it, even though it's hydrologically connected, will that be allowed by coastal?
And that's the case here.
That's the case here, but that is not for us to, it's not for us to decide what we're here for is road front.
But does the town have to sign off on it because that's
so-
purely coastal even though it's on our town property?
It's not on our town property, we are no longer accepting the road.
It's a private road.
So we didn't agree, the town didn't agree to anything, really, I mean.
Had we accepted the road, had they built it to 20 feet with all the specifications,
Then
we
then
might have to sign off
all
on
that
it.
issue, but the town isn't accepting.
Wow.
the road.
Correct, yeah, so we have an uphill battle on the permitting aspect with CRMC, again, with the filling of the wetlands, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm just trying to elaborate.
Yeah,
just
this is
in-
Tom Principe. He's
Tom
the-
Principe,
the
Principe Engineering Company, Mr. Chair, members of the board, good evening, sorry. Again, just to, on Jill's point, again, just real quick, you know, we worked extensively with everybody on my team, the town, even the CRMC going back and forth to try to, it's the least relief necessary, almost like zoning, right? You ask for the least relief necessary. So it's an avoidance and minimization document that we have to provide once we go to the CRMC coastal folks. Once we go there, we're gonna have to go through their variance process, because obviously we're not complying with their regulations 100%. We're filling in wetlands, we're asking for relief, but again, it's for access to an existing lot of record. So again, they do allow for that as long as we go under the correct engineering and those protocols and, you know, comply with their avoidance minimization, doing the leaf release necessary and mitigating, not only are we in a floodplain, but obviously we're filling in wetlands. So, you know, we're filling it in at a 1.5 to 1 ratio. So we're duplicating more than what we're disturbing. Again, all of the drainage has been analyzed, reanalyzed, properly mitigated for volume, recharge, water quality aspects. Again, it was given a lot of thought here. So again, if you know, our next step here, if it's a favorable recommendation tonight, is to now go and deal with CRMC and go through their permitting and their variance process, which they will analyze. Again, hydraulically, like Mr. Landry said, you know, we really wanted this compensation to be adjacent to the wetlands, but again, it is going to be private. From an engineering standpoint of view, I would prefer it here from a biological standpoint of view. But again, we'll have the CRMC engineers and biologists also review that, and that'll probably go to their council as well. So they're going to give it a fine.
But that's not specific relief that we have any
Correct.
But we can make it a condition of any decision we make.
Well,
That they get
approval,
Absolutely.
yeah, approval, of course, yeah,
Absolutely.
that's part of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Standard.
I just-
I have a quick question.
Okay, go ahead, Joe.
How does 113 have access to Marble Road?
Directly to Star Drive right here.
They come over to Star right now.
Yeah, this is obviously a public street and they come in directly, but they could potentially tap into this.
How would they do that, potentially tap into that? They gotta go through that swale?
Well, that's a good point, yeah, I'm not sure they'd be able to with the swell there, but they would have, if they're able to address that issue, they could tap in as, if this was developed or not open space, they could tap into that as well, subject to whatever permitting.
It would need additional engineering in the form of a culvert or crossing or something. I
And
mean,
who would, and then the 113 would have to do that?
if, yes, that's correct, if they feel that they need to have access to this as well.
That they could, if they wanted to present an application to the town and the state, they would have to submit an application to tie into that, to the extent it affects the swell.
And, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question, and it's the same question I had last time, and you've addressed a lot of my questions from last time, and I thank you. But I see topo lines on the proposed site, but I don't see any topo lines on the adjacent lot 113. My concern last time, my concern again is, you know, is this upland from 13? You know, what, because this is, you know, this is gonna be a major change, and the houses, 113, 112, 111 are gonna reap whatever impacts. So what mitigation is done? And I was hoping to see some topo lines so I could tell what the slope is. I mean, it's relatively
Yeah,
flat,
so-
obviously, but
Yeah.
what is being done to mitigate so these people don't end up with swimming pools in their
Yeah,
basement?
absolutely. Again, not only with your town bylaws with, you know, increase in runoff, but also CRMC's stringent rules and regulations regarding stormwater and excess impervious. So that's, I mean, that's a good point, is we have multiple drainage basins, if you will. Not only do we have this wetland floodplain compensation area, but I'll just outline that we have 3 detention basins. I have what's called a bioretention basin, number 1 here, off to the right-hand side of the page. And then to your point, is off to the left, which is this adjacent property line for Kearney Lot 113. We also have a very long bioretention system in here. So obviously the grades here are a little bit higher because of the water table. So right now it's generally draining this way, but after this is done, this entire impervious roof is all going to get tied in. Half of this roof will get tied into this drainage system and properly mitigated and then overflow into the wetlands. Now, this entire drainage system that we're constructing, and it's been engineered to mitigate the other half of the roof and a portion of this driveway. Once it gets into this drainage bioretention system, it then overflows and hydrologically connects to our also what's called a wet swale, which is another drainage basin, where not only do we have super elevation grades from the access road coming down into the wet swale, this bioretention is hydrologically connected to this, and then we have a culvert that also connects underneath the driveway. It's kind of hard to see. It says, I think there's a call out somewhere, but there's a culvert here that hydrologically connects, here we go, 6-inch diameter culvert. Here's that call out right here. This also connects to here, that goes into this floodplain compensation area, which is then again adjacent to the wetlands itself. So the entire site, if you were to model this property line, there should not be any sort of impacts or increase in drainage or runoff onto lot 13 after post-construction.
Is this 100-year storm?
Yes, yep,
100-year event?
yes.
Okay.
Anyone else? Let's,
So
go ahead.
So I had a question. So you're saying that the street right-of-way is not the town property?
That's correct.
Okay, is that?
Yeah, that's correct, because the town never
Accepted the road.
either the plat or town resolution.
And is Mr. Landry correct that with the extent of the roadway, the driveway, the fire marshal doesn't require a turnaround because it stops short of the
150.
100 feet, 150
Yeah,
feet?
that's
he
usually an
requires?
FTA regulation, so. one of the differences.
Okay.
Because the CRMC notes were that the town had to submit the wetlands, but if it's not town property, no.
Correct. Now, I see Mr. Garrity here. That doesn't mean that other people, whether it's the condo association, Mr. Kearney, anyone in the condo association has rights to their, you know, so that's a very complicated issue, but not an issue for this relief requested.
With this relief requested, so what's the standard on this, 150 feet frontage
So,
for this
so
size
Mr. Chairman, I
lot?
was going to ask that you could ask Tom Principe. It appears from this plan that there's about 459 feet of frontage, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, we don't, can you confirm what the actual area of improvement is, the frontage area, or linear length?
Linear length.
Right, so the variance, section 25.4 says that the road, that the property should be improved along the entire frontage. So 459 minus whatever the improvement is, would be the variance.
Right, because it's supposed to do the whole 450.
So it's not 150 feet, it's the frontage itself, whatever the
The
frontage
entire-
is along the road, along the right of way.
Okay. And is that 459 because this is a private road?
No, it's 459 because it's two lots, lots 114 and 115.
Oh, okay, sorry, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it looks approximately like 165 feet. It's about 15 feet past that cutoff of 150-foot length. So it's about 165, if I'm understanding correctly. So right to this improvement, right to this point,
From your property line to that point.
it's approximately, because this is well, this is actually 150, but on the drawing right, and again, is conservatively is about 160.
So Ms. Prinsky, from your property line right here to this point here.
Oh, okay. So I don't have that information right now available. I could take a minute and take a look at that.
Yeah, so the reason why it's important is this board has to grant a specific relief, obviously.
Sure.
So,
Yep.
we just want to get that number.
All right. Got a minute to check that out.
Yeah, go ahead. And Ms. Sabo, Mr. DeLuca, historically, in cases like this, we have been amenable to the minimum completion of the private road, rather than creating an asphalt stretch into an area that's probably not ever going to be developed.
You had a case only a few months ago, South Hillview Drive.
It was Gil, and then you had another one called Giovanni.
Yeah, and we had one right at the end of Fifth Avenue many years ago. You and Dr. O'Neill was on the board at the time, not the current membership. But point being,
Making a point. Go ahead.
I didn't say. I
So we've been looking like at this kind of relief forever, is what you're saying.
We have, and there have been times when staff has been opposed to it, and times when staff has been supportive. But I do believe the board has, just about every time that I can recall, supported the allowance because the road couldn't continue any further because of the natural
The
resource
environmental
constraint at the far end.
And Mr. Richards owns essentially
He owns the
the
4
two
lots.
merged lots potentially and the 2 lots after that.
That's correct, yep.
And
Well, yes.
Go ahead.
So they're in different ownerships, so he and his wife own, I think, 114 and 115, and then their kids own 116 and 117. So they're technically in different ownership, but same family.
But obviously, if something bizarre happened in the future and those lots were developed from that way, someone would have to develop the entire
That's right.
private drive.
So they have to come in and redo all of this again for that extent.
No. You could extend the private drive, but that's,
Well, we would
Yeah, but
need,
you
we
still
would
have to
need all
deal
the
with the
same.
wetlands and all of
Yeah,
that.
we would need
Yeah,
the same.
you need all the
yeah,
same
And it
stuff.
obviously costs an extensive amount
Yeah.
of
Got
money to pave something that
Okay.
far. But that's not his intent at all. Those lots are wet. There's even worse wetlands as you go further. It gets much bigger. So it'd be a much bigger issue.
and is there an access to this,
That was my
to that
question.
road on the other end?
There's,
You got a bigger map, Joe, or no?
I think there's
No.
another paper street that comes down from the north, but again, they've got all the same wetlands issues. I think there's another road that comes down that was never developed.
But not a developed.
No, for the same reason. It was never improved to my knowledge. I'm not sure if it's still Marble Road or if it's called something else, but it swings around to the north. Is it Ledge? Ledge Road. It swings around to the north, but that was never developed either.
Oh,
you had-
Ledge Road, excuse me, Ledge Road is developed for a portion of it. No, not at all? Don't I see a sign for
The
that?
vernal pool right at the end of it.
Oh, okay. Okay, Mr. Principe, do you have it?
25 feet. If you want to pull up that plan again, I can just confirm exactly where we're getting the dimension from. There we go. So from this iron rod from the corner here, along this frontage to this point is 25 feet.
So it's 469 minus 25.
459, I believe. Yeah.
Yes.
459 minus 25.
459 minus 25. Is the documented relief that would need to be granted. And that's, okay. Do you have anything else, guys?
I don't think so. We're happy to answer any questions you may have, but you know, it's an unusual situation where you've got a paper street and you're bringing in a roadway and trying to work with it. I mean, we had went back to the drawing board after December to see if we could keep this private and put a 12-foot driveway in. And that didn't make a lot of sense after discussions with the town. So we're trying to make a good faith effort to keep a reasonable distance here at my client's expense, obviously, to ensure that engineering was satisfied with the width. That was what was originally agreed to. We really didn't have room to go to 18 feet because of the wetlands, the mitigating factors, and again, 16 feet was generally accepted. But he's accepting the maintenance and operation of that roadway, understands that, and you know, the proper plans will be submitted in accordance with Mr. Wallace's comments. So.
All right, thanks. Let's hear from the public, and then you can come back and respond, Mr. Landry. So, Mr. Garrahy, do you want to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, John Garrahy, on behalf of several abutters, Jack Kearney, whose property is here, Paul Choquette, who's right across from Marble Road, and Susan Weiner, who's right next to the property over here. And I'd also say that I live on Star Drive. I'm not going to say I'm going to represent myself, but I do live in this area and know it well. You indicated there's major changes to this property, and that is for sure. And I don't want this board to give an imprimatur to the fact that they're allowing less than the required frontage on a private road to make it look like this board is approving what's being done here. I know there's a lot of approvals that are required from CRMC, but this is a significant wetland. They call it a swamp. I was out there on Sunday and I took pictures. It is a river. Marble Road is a river. And just because it was platted, and I'll present these, and just because it was platted back in the 70s or the 60s, doesn't mean it was intended to be built, and it obviously wasn't, because it has never been built out. So the photographs I have were taken by myself on Sunday. Behind you can see the condominium project as well.
Give them to our new secretary, Mr.
Sorry, thank you.
And he gets to do it. So here you go, Jerry.
Jerry, you gotta put stickies on and stuff.
Yeah, you got a sticky on
You gotta
it.
put a sticky on each one, put a number and a date.
My only job, right?
Oh, no, we'll find other things. We'll find other things.
All right, you want me to just number?
A number, yeah.
Yeah,
One's one and one's two.
Put
and a
objectives,
date.
yeah, objectives.
Mr. Chair, I've been out there, you know, we go on sites. It struck me that a lot of this area has been disturbed at some point in time, either by truck or dug out or something, so there are gullies that were formed in addition to the wetlands there. You know, I'm not sure,
Let's see what Mr. Gary.
is that where this water is collecting?
Well, I'll let the neighbors talk to that point directly, because they.
Yeah, why don't you finish your comments?
I will, but they have more direct knowledge and direct abutters. But let me say this, and Tom principally mentioned least relief necessary. There has been very little discussions with the neighbors with respect to how this can be accomplished. And I can speak for myself and the people that I represent, that they're not opposed to this. They want this to happen, but it's going to happen properly. And if you start disturbing and moving the wetlands around, this is going to end up in this property, to your question with respect to the lines are and how it slopes. It's going to end up here, it's going to end up on the Choquette property, the Weiner property, and God forbid, my property. There's already issues on Star Drive with respect to drainage. This cannot make it better. This cannot make it better. They're turning away the way it presently is, and the swale is going to direct the wetlands onto my client's property. So there's significant issues here, and Mr. Kearney can talk to this, but he was willing to provide access. Now, I know that needs relief with respect to an easement and how they can get into their property, but this needs a lot of relief. So if you had an easement here that would allow them to get in through his property, it would not have affected the wetlands and as much, for sure, because it's away from the roadway where the wetlands is considerable, and would have alleviated many of the concerns with respect to drainage. but they didn't want to have any discussions with respect to that because evidently they didn't have ownership of it. I also, and this is the first time I'm hearing this issue of public road, private road. I thought it was going to be turned into a public road, and now it's a private road, which raises all kinds of issues about what rights the plat owners has into that road, because as owners on a plat, they have rights in the platted streets. So all the owners have rights in that road, and so those raises all kinds of issues from my perspective as to maintenance and whether we're responsible for the maintenance of this road, we being the owners on the plat, and those types of things. I'll let Mr. Kearney and the Smiths talk about it themselves, but I just don't want, and I wasn't even sure what the relief was before this board tonight. I guess it's relief from the planning board to allow less than the required frontage on a private road. Doesn't that require zoning board approval as well?
Yeah. We're just a recommendation to them.
Oh, it's only a recommendation.
But the wetland issue, apparently we have no even recommended authority.
Well,
We can comment, and we may.
I mean, this is a subdivision without being a subdivision, and honestly, and.
But CRMC's got to make the final decision on that, but I think we can offer an opinion about the wetland.
I wish you would.
I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who's next, wants to speak? Just identify yourself, please,
My
sir.
name is John J. Carney. My name is John J. Carney. I live lot 113. I've lived there for almost 30 years. This right here is a little wetland, and if you bring up that other drawing that they have, they want to put this swell right here. You kept asking about, well, how's Mr. Carney if he wanted to put his driveway? Well, my driveway could go straight. There's no swell right now. There's nothing, because they're going to put this road in, and that's going to create the swell. It's not there. So it's not there. So you're going to put the swell. So I couldn't put my driveway straight into that road, which I could if there was no swell that they created. I could go right in. And this is, I get emotional, but this is America. I mean, it doesn't mean I have to be on Star Drive if I would like to be on Marvin. And I didn't know the town changed this from public road to a private road. Did they do that?
No,
If
so,
it's not, go ahead, Steve.
yeah, so essentially, even though a road is platted, until it's accepted by the town council, or some other things happen, the town pays it, town does other things, it remains private, subject to the rights, as Mr. Gary said, of all the either abutting landowners or landowners in
So
the
is that
plat.
my right as well? Because
That's correct.
I have 125
Yes.
feet of it.
I'm not here to advise you, but you clearly do, you're an abutting landowner, so.
So I have 125 feet of that proposed road, that all of a sudden they want to fill this in, which has been almost a skating rink for years. When it freezes up and everything, the Mahoney's have skated back there and played hockey for years, all the way into the back. This was here. Now all of a sudden we're gonna have this swell. It's gonna be along my property, and I already have a sub pump in my house that pumps water, because all this water that comes in from all these area comes towards my house. Now all of a sudden you're gonna be moving all kinds of water all over the place, and I'm gonna be getting even more water. Where's it gonna go? Is it gonna go? It's gonna go into this swell, and then this swell is gonna flood over into the people's property. I don't know whether you said you've been on Star Drive. You've seen the water. You've seen the water flowing out. You've seen the water going down towards the Mahoney's property, practically burying them underwater. What do you think is going to happen when they do this? There's going to be tons more water. It's going to go right into Paul Choquette's property. It's going to go right into Susan Weiner's property and turn those properties into lakes. I mean, I don't understand what, you know, I mean, if you give them this allowance that they don't have to put a road in, a proper road, with proper drainage, with proper everything, then I don't know why you guys are here. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be protecting, to make sure that people do things right. Not do things so that they can put, and I know, Mike, you're gonna get mad at me, a private driveway in. You know, on property that abuts my property. What rights do I have? I mean,
Okay.
I just ask you to really give it some real consideration.
Thank you, appreciate it. Mr. Marcel, to the point of a private road.
Oh, excuse me, can I say one more thing?
Yep.
And I also gave over to Mike, because I had some conversation with the Richards about putting in and giving them an easement through my property. But every time we were almost coming to an agreement, they would change what they proposed to me. And that's the reason why that conversation closed down.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Marcello, the point about the private road versus public, all the abutters have rights to it?
The abutters, and if it was platted, everyone in the plat, too.
So what's the right of?
They have rights, access rights, so what, as Mr. Landry said, they could access the road, you can't impede the road, you know, in other words.
But the Richards are able to, or Mr. Landry as a representative, able to have a negotiation with the town to create a private road of certain dimensions, and the neighbors only have a right to access that.
Well,
Not to say that you can't do that.
I don't represent Mr. Kearney, but clearly the fact that there's a swale there, that they're creating a swale, may impact him appropriately as opposed to other people in the neighborhood.
You want to wait?
where,
Oh, yeah, I can wait.
you know, where he would have a legal right to challenge it.
So, I'm sorry.
You know, the question is.
I think I have the same question. I just don't see where my answer was. If this was plotted with the original plat, that means everybody
Everyone in the plat has the right to
access it.
Yep.
But the only ones who have a say in its construction are the people that are proposing it. Nobody else has any say in its construction.
Well, as far as the town's concerned, we're only here, that applicant has come before the town.
Right.
And said, and that didn't mean Mr. Kearney couldn't have done that.
But shouldn't the other abutters have to sign off on that if someone's developing?
Yeah, maybe I'm not explaining myself. So if this is private, it's not public, so we're in that fun area. And at least the Carneys are abutters.
Yep.
But if it was plotted with the original development, then everybody has access to it.
Correct.
But my question is, the only ones that have a say in its construction are the person that's constructing it.
So here's where.
They don't have a right of interest in that.
Me and Mr. Landry have had an issue is, and certainly he can respond to this, is when the application goes before coastal, do the other landowners have to join in on the application?
Okay.
The application to compensate the wetland and swap it.
Correct.
They have to sign on as.
Well, that's going to be an issue at the next level.
That's another pay grade.
Because they're taking the wetlands from property that is not solely owned
By them.
by them.
Right.
Okay.
You know, it's.
But let's
There's
say.
a reason why this was 4 lots were purchased for $30,000 because this is a title nightmare.
But let's say the wetland issue, just for example, didn't exist. Could any one of the abutters develop, I guess to Mr. Brady's question,
They could put in a
private
private road,
and the other abutters don't have the right to.
Well, they could object, but as long as you're not blocking any access, anything like that, and the town doesn't want to accept, again, normally what happens is the town accepts the road.
Yeah, normally, but those discussions are fruitless at this point.
Correct.
Right? The town's not accepting the road.
And we're not making any decisions here. We're just making recommendations that will go to zoning.
For one limited issue, which is lot frontage on,
Right,
on the development.
but feel free to
Comment.
give an opinion,
Yeah.
And
findings of fact about other things, that just so
Oh,
CRMC could
absolutely.
take the planning
You know,
board's
that-
view on these things, right?
Should the
So
board give any recommendations, clearly you could, that you're not,
we could opine on the wetland.
this is not in any way improving, the wetlands any,
Right.
or who has access or who has the ability to. That's why, frankly, in Mr. Landry's defense is, we tried to get that answer from Coastal.
I know.
And they didn't give it to us, so I had no opinion but to allow this to move forward based upon just this one limited issue.
Right.
But we can make a finding of fact
Right.
within the context of this. It's not relief that we're required or allowed to make an opinion on, but we can make a finding of fact relative to the wetland and other things, if we want, such as. Do either of you or both of you want to say anything?
Yeah.
Both of you? You want to get up together, or do you want to get up separately?
I'll see you.
If you could identify yourself, Mr. Smith.
My name is David Smith. I live on 24 Castle Road.
Which lot is that?
Which is lot 1 Leather.
Okay,
This
I
is
see it.
Beautiful mansion up here. So we straddle the two of the lots. And there's engineering here to take care of water flowing, and engineering to take, apparently designed to take care of water flowing into Carney's lot. Water can flow north, and there's nothing in the plan to keep water from flowing into that lot. Right now, there are at least 20 trees in there, and there's, surface water is filtered and retarded to keep water off our lot. When they put in a full basement on there, they're going to be displacing some groundwater, and I don't see any reason to withdraw the comment that we made in the previous meeting, that we thought that this was direct water not only to our lot, but to 112 and Nathaniel's, and to 110, the Shorris's lot.
So let me just stop you, don't sit down. So, Ms. Sabo,
Yes.
from our understanding of what the engineering department reviewed, is the calculation by Mr. Principe's firm show that there wouldn't be any runoff on any of the lots, including Mr. Smith?
So the engineering department provided 2 letters. One
Right.
was in reference to the right way, and then one was in reference to the property itself. With conditions that are required to be met, the engineering letter states that there shall be no net runoff. Essentially, that's the purpose of section 7.7.
Right, and Mr. Smith, you're saying
I
there
don't-
didn't appear to be any calculation in that
No.
regard, and we'll let the applicant
And I didn't,
address that after.
I-
Go ahead.
The contours on my lot are like when I'm only picking it off of counting Narragansett, but they're less, quite less than the contours on the back of the hardscape or whatever the patio that they're putting up. It drains straight down north. So that's a major concern that we have.
Okay. All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Ms. Smith,
I'm okay. Yeah.
you just said you wanted.
Then you took my line, so it's okay.
Okay, Mr. Landry, Mr. Principe, do you want to address the concerns that have been raised? And then I'll get back. Oh, wait a minute, just a second. Mr. Gary, did you have anything else now that the people have spoken?
No.
You all set?
Just to address this first comment about the drainage issue,
Right.
again, just the point with, the town engineer, we went through that extensively. There's no net runoff for this entire project. Again, just to reiterate, once we get the CRMC, again, their engineers and their policies also require us to mitigate no net runoff. So not only do we have the bylaws of the town of Narragansett, but also the coastal CRMC folks are also going to be looking at it twice. So we're going to have two sets of eyes, two sets of engineers looking at the actual drainage standpoint of view. And I get it, it's a wet site, the wetlands are flagged, high water table, floodplain, and I get it, but all those have been taken into consideration with the actual engineering and the hydrology design. So there isn't, again, to the point of there is not a bioretention basin here. This is probably the only side of the property that we don't have a drainage system.
Right, you don't.
Right, but we don't necessarily need it for our net increase because all of this runoff here from the development is getting captured in a gutter system. It's all getting captured. So this portion of the roof is coming down to this drainage system, and then this drainage system is hydrologically connected to this wetland system. And then whatever can't get into here, that's why we've designed this drainage system to obviously protect Mr. Carney here, but also to mitigate any runoff from this roof. These roof leaders and the driveway will get collected into this drainage system. Now, again, as an engineer, we look at, you know, the overflow and where is it going to, right? So this drainage system, bioretention system, like I said earlier in the evening, this is hydrologically connected to this wet swale, which is another technically bioretention, but this wet swale also drains underneath a culvert that goes into the compensation area that then drains hydraulically to the wetland system. So again, as an engineer, when we look at our perimeter and our property line and we analyze that after construction, they call it pre-construction. So what we do as an engineer is we analyze the site pre-construction. What is it now? And then post-construction to make sure there is no adverse effects with development. So obviously, if we didn't have this drainage system designed the way we have it, yes, you would absolutely have flooding, ponding, and it would be worse with construction.
But Mr. Pritzby, the standard in town is no net additional runoff. There may be runoff coming from that area to other people and to the road.
Correct.
And to neighbors.
Correct.
But that's not this applicant's responsibility to fix. They're just supposed to make sure
it's not going to be any
they
worse.
don't add anything to
Correct.
it. So just speak to the point of the road.
Yes.
Mr. Carney's point about the,
yeah, and that,
the
I mean,
runoff going down the road.
Yeah, I mean, that was a good point. Again, yeah, there's a pond here, there's flooding, and again, we had that flagged by Scott Rabideau. So we know exactly where that actual hydraulic wetland system is. So again, with the wet swale, and if you look at the grades, again, this is, I'm going back to the point earlier this evening, this whole driveway is super elevated. So any runoff or any rain that falls down on this access driveway is going to drain towards this new wet swale. Now the bottom of this wet swale is a few tenths higher than this culvert pipe and where it's draining to. So technically, all of this new construction is draining back towards the wetland. There's no run, very little, just the apron. Just a small little apron would be going off the Star Drive, which is very, very minimal. So, you know, again, this was a very tough site, again, for an engineering standpoint of view, and this took us months and months of analysis, back and forth, other people on my team, to bounce it around. You know, I have Karen, who was here last meeting. She's been doing this for almost 40 plus years. I've been only doing this for about 20. And again, this is probably one of the tougher, more difficult drainage jobs. But again, it's, if you give it some thought and, you know, a little ingenuity in engineering, you can make it work. And again, we have regulations and policies that we have in place too for us as engineers. And we need to protect the property owners. So from a drainage standpoint of view, I can, you know, understand your point.
Mr. Brady?
Yeah, so the road crowns to the wet swale.
Super elevated, yeah, it's no crown, super elevated. So it's high on one side, it comes down like this.
It's pitch.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
What's the pitch from the street to the back of the road? Does that also pitch back towards this
So
wetlands?
yeah, so it drains, correct, yep. So you can kind of see, so 14, 13, 12, so we couldn't get it to go the other way, so it's draining this way, this way, this way. So it's coming back, but it's super elevated, so it's draining this way, this way. It's on an angle, it's on like a 45-degree angle.
And that wet swill is designed for a 100-year event?
This wet swill is designed to mitigate this runoff for a 100-year event, which also has the overflow. So again, I know we talk about 500-year storms, 200-year storms. We get a lot of, significant events lately, unfortunately. But having the hydrologic connection and the overflow to the floodplain compensation area, and then having that connect to an adjacent wetland is, I think, pretty significant to the surrounding neighbors, because a lot of times when we have site constraints, we have a property like maybe Mr. Kearney's property, where he doesn't have any adjacent wetlands connected, so our overflow would be to an adjacent property owner, right? This overflow for a 200-year event or catastrophic event, all that's draining to this wetland system that's going to kind of capture and collect that excess runoff itself. So all of that surface water flow is being directed towards the wetland and back where it belongs.
Mr. Brady.
Question.
Yeah.
On the swill on Mr. Kearney's property side, okay, at the
This
top,
side, yeah,
at the
sure.
top of the back side of the swill.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there anything that can be done to minimize any overflow into his property if it happened?
Yeah, what's the elevation?
So yeah, so this elevation, this is the low side. Yeah,
Right.
so this drains this, so once it gets into here, it drains this way and out the culvert.
Right, it's a shotgun run.
Sure.
I got
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I think his concern is that he's naked to the back side.
Mhm.
So is there anything that can be done to the backside there to mitigate a
Absolutely,
little
yeah,
bit
we
more?
could also add a berm in here
Okay.
to increase that height.
Yep.
Right?
Now, my other question, and again, has to do with runoff, and this is why I wish there had been some topo on the others. I understand the system, and I applaud the engineering here, because this is significant.
Yeah.
But the focus is the runoff from the roofs. Okay, so you got
Sure.
the deck,
Yeah.
and you've got the back screen porch,
Right
okay?
here, yep.
All right, and then just down from that, we're at 19 feet.
Mhm.
So, no, going to the back, so we're at 19.
Yep.
That all slopes, based on what I can see on the property itself even, 4 feet down
Yep.
to the back. And I see
Yes.
not, and again, this is my concern as the neighbors,
Sure.
because this is significant,
Yep.
and again, I understand the engineering,
Yep, yep.
and I applaud it. But that backside of the property, yes, the roof runoff, et cetera, goes in, and it's an excellent system and it's a great approach. But the lot itself drops 4 feet straight back. And I don't
Yeah,
see
this one,
anything,
yeah, it's
and I don't
lower
see
here.
anything back there
Correct.
to prevent.
So we could go again, one step more, and I'm amenable to that. Because again, just to the point, so what you're saying, so what's unprotected is this would be all lawn area over here. And again, with the grade itself, this grade's lower, we could do either a berm in here, or again, some sort of swale, which would protect any runoff from this lawn area. Because all of this perimeter and outline is all getting mitigated through the drainage system. So to your point, Brady, is we could also further look into putting in some sort of a swale there, which I'm sure our client would be amenable to, we'd be amenable to, because that just further improve our drainage analysis and
Mr.
whatnot.
Friday, do you have a comment?
Yeah, so somebody talked about displaced groundwater, and I know your calculations are all looking at runoff. Did you look at displaced groundwater? Because it's a really high water table.
Yeah, so that's a great point, and that goes into another category, when it comes almost into the building permit category. Us as engineers, we can't quantify groundwater, well, you could, but when we talk about displacement, I mean, I could calculate the displacement. However, if you're in the groundwater, then it's going to be a constant issue. So us as engineers, that groundwater, our drainage system cannot support groundwater. We cannot support a sump pump. So, I mean, I can go on the record for that. We can't support a sump pump. So, again, I'm sure my client would be amenable to putting some stipulation on it that, to have that foundation design above the water table so we don't create another nuisance. Because I've seen it time and time again with other projects and other properties, it's too late, they put the sump pump in, I got a great drainage system, but that sump pump wasn't designed for it. So that is a great point. That I'm sure client would be amenable to. So.
Okay.
Can I just add something to that? I'm not gonna go into any engineering, I promise. Just with the rights in a private road, this public versus private, and I'm sympathetic to that. It's not what we wanted to do either, to be frank with you. I mean, we had extensive conversations with DPW, the fire marshal, staff, engineering, well over a year ago, when this project was in its initial stages. And it was our understanding from that meeting that it could be a 16-foot wide, 160-foot long public roadway. And for one reason or not, different people in different departments, that has been retracted. And we've kind of been forced to make this a private roadway. We wanted this to be public as of the last meeting, and we could not satisfy to the town's satisfaction why we needed a 16-foot roadway. And Ms. Beck testified at length as to why we couldn't make this 18 feet because of all the wetlands issues, the adverse impacts, the requirement that we mitigate to the largest extent possible any effects on the wetlands. 16 feet was really as wide as we could get. And from my understanding, DPW wouldn't sign off on 16 feet, even though the planning board has jurisdiction to waive those requirements under its subdivision regulations. I think they've done so in the past. I didn't see why we couldn't do that, but it doesn't satisfy the 18-foot requirement of the subdivision regs. So it has to be private, and that's why we're there. But I just want to make sure that the neighbors know we tried to make this public. My client had every intent of doing that, and this design really hasn't changed, except shortening it to 150 feet. But we do understand the rights in paper streets. I know it's a little bit confusing, and it's not really, germane to this application in regards to the relief we're asking. But we understand we can't stop anybody else who has rights in this plat in Marble Road from accessing what we built. We understand that, we concede that, we know that. We're doing it at our expense to access our lot. Mr. Kearney is really the only one I think that would benefit from accessing it here if he wants to. And I don't want to hold my client to this because Tom may need to look into the engineering. We could potentially swap this wet swale and put it here. If that is possible, I don't want to make it an absolute promise because I don't know if it's even possible to do that.
Can you show where you're indicating that?
Sure, it seems that Mr. Kearney may have some concern here with this wet swell impacts on his property and potentially accessing Marble Road. From a legal standpoint, I can say we're not inhibiting his access because he could still come and start a drive. I mean, I don't think it gets so specific, but if that was a concern of his, my client obviously can't prohibit him. We could look into the engineering to swap these, keep everything exactly the same, but move the swale to this property, because this, I think, is an open space anyway, and there's no intent to develop that. If that would satisfy him, I don't think we have a problem with that. I don't know if it's possible, so I don't want to commit to that, or how that changes staff's review, but that's a potential solution. And I would just say that before I got involved in this, my client, Mr. Kearney, had extensive conversations about easements and land swaps and alternative rights to this. They couldn't come to an agreement for one reason or not. It wasn't involved in those discussions. It just didn't work out, and there's no requirement that my client has an easement to access his property. He has a legal right to access this the same as everybody else does that has rights at Marble Road, and he's improving it, and to the extent anybody has an interest in it, I mean, they have a right to use it. So I just wanted to clarify that. I mean, if that's possible, we're willing to look at that. I just don't know if engineering-wise that is possible, but they may resolve Mr. Kearney's concerns. It will resolve some of his drainage concerns. And I'm not a technical expert with this stuff, but Tom's been doing this for a long time, and having systems in place on these properties is certainly better than not, and it's certainly going to improve the drainage issues that we have here and the flooding issues to some extent. And we're not legally allowed to increase runoff to other properties, and Tom obviously has testified at length, but I think anybody can say that having systems in place that are well designed to current standards certainly will help alleviate some of the flooding concerns. But that's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Landry. Before that issue came up, I wanted to talk to the board about continuing this because there's a lot to process, and I wasn't ready to make a decision. But it also seems like there's some things that could be discussed about relocation of private road or the swale, and some other issues that have been raised here that you guys may want to address between now and the next meeting. But regardless of that, I'm not ready personally to make a decision right now. I need to think about everything that's been said here today. Mr.
I
Fry?
agree, and I guess just an observation, Mr. Kearney seems willing to talk about an easement, and it seems you could avoid a lot of cost of construction and a lot of wetlands by working with him to get an easement there.
Yeah, I mean, we've tried that, there were extensive discussions, I'm not sure that's gonna be fruitful at this point, but we'll,
I mean, when I was
consider it.
walking there, I mean, you're calling it a wet swale, it looks to me like a vernal pool.
Yeah, right.
It's 2 feet deep.
Yeah, me
I mean,
too.
I can't imagine constructing a road there that's gonna hold up at all.
And actually, the displacement, or the, what do you call it?
Displacement of groundwater.
No, the replacement of the swap of the wetland. what do you-
Compensation.
The compensation of the wetland. The wetland is so significant
Yeah.
that, you know, the elements of our comp plan have to be looked at in terms of us. I know that CRMC is going to make the decision, but we could make an opinion on whether it was conforming to the comp plan with 3,900 square feet of wetland fill. I mean, that's a significant amount. If you look at our natural resource components of our comp plan, I did today, again, just in anticipation of this, and there's a couple of things that we have to be very careful about. So I need to chew over more, and hopefully you guys can have some discussions with the neighbors and maybe mitigate that wetland fill. I don't know.
My initial impression is it's a vernal pool. I wouldn't call it a wetland swale, so.
I think all parties involved would benefit from a continuous clearing outside. There's a lot to chew over here.
So I think that's the way we're gonna go, unless anybody disagrees. So I have a motion to continue.
I have a quick question though.
Oh, wait a minute, I just wanna, when you guys make the motion, we don't have to put it for a date certain, right? We'll do everything we can to schedule it
we
as
would-
expeditiously as possible.
we would prefer the next meeting.
I know you
I
would.
think we could resolve a lot of these issues.
And I'll try to get it on the next agenda, but there's no promises, just based on other things that are going on, but hopefully we can get it on in April. So, go ahead, Jerry, what?
What's preventing 18 feet instead of 16 feet? Maybe I should know that.
Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak for the town, but we, since that December meeting, we've had a lot of pushback from DPW because it doesn't satisfy, the subdivision regulations require 18 feet for lots up to 5 lots in the subdivision regulations. Because it's less than 18 feet, he's not comfortable accepting it as a town roadway, at least I don't want to mischaracterize it.
Yeah,
but
so
that's-
our engineer, obviously, I represent the engineers and DPW also, that they've given their opinion that they don't want to accept the 16-foot road.
Well, my
as-
question is, what's preventing an 18-foot road?
That they don't,
The one-
that, in other words, what's presenting and what's preventing an 18-foot private road is that they can't do that because, at least, and if I understand this correctly, is by increasing the road by 2 feet, there's not enough wetland, there's not enough compensation area to capture all the runoff. So that's why they need the road shorter and the compensation area larger. So that's what.
So that's how tight it is. That they put 2 feet, they can't mitigate.
2 feet of the swell.
Yeah, there's no way to keep, there's obviously the calculations change. You know, and I mean, we could have put in a 12-foot private driveway and asked for relief from that and had different systems, but that was not, the consensus was that 16 feet was appropriate for emergency purposes, obviously, and we want to make sure it's safe.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so
Can I get a motion to continue?
I would move to continue.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Brady, second by Mr. Burnett, all those in favor?
Aye.
4-0, thank you, good luck,
Yeah,
Howard.
thank you.
We'll look forward to the next meeting, thanks. Thanks, folks, for coming out. We're on YouTube from now on, if you want to watch us.
How many people are still watching?
I got 10.
You didn't lose anyone, that's good, I actually gained somebody.
There are people that know more about wetlands right now than they ever expect.
So I have 10 viewers, one of them is me. And 2 is there.
We have 8.
Yeah, really.
Is your wife watching?
All right. All right, folks.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You guys want to take it out, if you talk, only because of the mics. Thanks, Mr. Principe. Okay, next item on the agenda is a recommendation of town council. This is continued. HDC ordinance, new historic district, the Camp, Clark Road, town of Narragansett. Mr. DeLuca, do you want to get up to the podium and answer this, or do you want to sit there?
I'd rather sit here, but I'll go to the podium if you want.
Well, you're the official town representative.
And we want you on camera.
So, Mike, we were at the last meeting talking about this, and the question arose about whether we could potentially protect buildings, but not protect the entire parcel,
Yeah.
because it's Parks and Rec and those things, and you were gonna come back with a finding and maybe a recommendation, so.
Yeah, so I gave you a memorandum dated March 15th, it's in all your packets, and that is supported by some draft language that's directly attached to that, which I'll go over briefly, and then some legal research on historic zoning and a copy of a couple of emails back and forth between me and staff at the Rhode Island Historic Preservation and Heritage Commission. So, I was asked to look at the possibility that the district could be established, but only protecting the 4 buildings that we had described before. And as you recall, they would have been the windmill, which is there, the office building, which is there, the Department of Parks and Recreation, where is it?
Yeah, that was it. It was right, it's right next to the skating rink, right there. The log cabin, that's the facility you can rent.
Yeah, and I'm forgetting the name of that building, excuse me.
Well, they have 2 buildings with similar names, so they're confusing.
Yeah, give me a second. The Clark Center, that was the Clark Center, excuse me, over there. And then you got the recreation building, which is this one. These 2 big buildings are the condominiums,
Yeah, they're not part of it.
affordable housing condominiums, and there's a lot line in between these, which you don't see here. It goes like this. So the town owns this, and then all that. So I was asked to look into that. I looked at, first of all, I looked at the state law. And, oh, thanks, Jim. And so you've got that right there in the attachment. I highlighted some significant components of it. The state law and the 45, Rhode Island General Laws 45-24.1-1 is declaration of purpose. It says the town council has power by ordinance to regulate construction, alteration, repair, moving and demolition of historic structures in the town. There's several purposes that are described there. Historic, jump down to historic district definition under section 1.1 of that same law. Historic district means a specific division of a city or town as designated by ordinance pursuant to this chapter, state law. A historic district may include 1 or more structures. That's the whole definition. Historic district zoning is authorized in the next section of the law. The town has the authority to establish and change layout and define districts which are deemed to be of historical or architectural value. Towns are presently empowered to establish or change areas and classifications of zoning. Okay, fine. Moving down to item 21, which is very interesting. This has been on the books in the Rhode Island General Law for many years. This isn't new. 45-24.1-21. It's a specific set of element of state law to the town of Narragansett. And I didn't really know about it until I did this homework. It says, in addition to all of the powers granted by the provisions of the chapter, the town of Narragansett is authorized by ordinance to establish upon recommendation
of its Historic District Commission a list of specified buildings or structures which are deemed to be of historic or architectural value, and from time to time to add or delete from the list in the same manner as is presently empowered. What it says is, you keep in mind, that was on the books long before we had historic district zoning. And what it did was it allowed the town to identify individual properties that had historic value and identify them. It didn't say regulate. It didn't tell us we could regulate. It just said we could identify.
Good list.
Right. So there's no, so it's not an official designation, but it does kind of reinforce kind of where we're going here. When you look at the town ordinance, which is the next page, we define historic district as a specific division of as designated by ordinance of the town of Narragansett pursuant to the chapter, which is the zoning ordinance, chapter 5, within the zoning ordinance. A historic district as established hereunder shall be regulated as an overlay zone pursuant to section 5 of the chapter. Properties designated voluntary on any local historic district map shall not be regulated under section 5. It says properties. It doesn't say structures, but it says properties. When you look down at the designation of districts, you can see that section 5.5 of the ordinance. It lists the districts that we know, Central Street, Towers, et cetera, et cetera. We would be adding to that list, which we can't if we do add it. But subsection under that says it's the intent of this section that historic property owned by the town of Narragansett within the boundaries of designated historic districts, as shown on the historic district map, shall not be exempt from the provisions of this section. So that was written back in 2009 when the ordinance was passed. It wasn't written anytime recently. And what it says is it reminds us, you know, we have the same responsibility that any private property owner has if we own property within a designated locally regulated district. And we're standing in one of those buildings right now. This building, when any exterior architectural changes are made, will have to come to the Historic District Commission for review. So then you go down to 5.6, which is the regulations. And we don't have to go through this too closely. It just, basically, it authorizes the Historic District Commission to approve any alteration of any historic structure in any district. So, where does that take us? It took me to contacting HVAC. Right. My colleague there, Sarah Zuria, she and I have been colleagues for many years. She calls me for advice, I call her for advice. We've worked on committees together. I contacted Sarah first and I asked her, what do you think about this idea? And I think you can see her email is there. She wasn't familiar with.
She kind of punted on this.
Yeah, she did. Okay, she punted. But she punted it up ladder to her boss, Jeff Emity, who's the executive director. And he said he agreed with Sarah that ultimately it's up to the town. They didn't, neither of them, and they certainly have many, many more years of knowledge and experience in the historic realm than me. Neither of them saw any obstacle
to just
doing
designating
the local regulation that we wanted to specify only apply to the buildings themselves. So with that, I wrote you this addendum that basically, you know, the memo says this is what I found. And in the last paragraph, or next to last, I stated that I could draft a specifically worded ordinance essentially creating a hybrid zone. Now recall, we're one of 2 communities in the state that have voluntary historic district zoning, maybe 3. I think Pawtucket and possibly Warren and us. All the rest that have historic districts have regulated districts only. When we passed the voluntary component, it was because there was questions about the, you know, the validity of a particular series of blocks or a series of properties as to whether or not that area should be regulated. And as you know, we started with 3 voluntary areas. We had the Earls Court District. The entirety of the Earls Court District was voluntary right from the beginning. We had Wildfield Farm Road at the southern end of the Ocean Road District. And then we had
the area here in the Central Street District that was not, of the properties that were not fronting on Central Street or one or two lots in on the side streets, Rockland, Robinson, Caswell. And essentially what we approved was the Central Street District, Town Council approved as going from Kingstown Road to Rodman Street. But the only regulated properties were the ones on that central spine that directly reflected the National Register District established in 1978. So this building was in the district. The house next door to us was not. It got vinyl sided a couple of years after the historic district zone was passed. Looks good, but it got vinyl sided.
So the voluntary district only means that the people who live in those houses, for cases where people, private homes, they can go to the HDC to get advice. They're not required to, and consequently, if they do go and the HDC makes suggestions, they're not obligated to incorporate those. So
totally correct.
It's completely voluntary, even to go to the HDC.
Right. There was one caveat, and it was an interesting hook and a very prescient hook. In the ordinance, which I didn't copy that for you here today, but in the ordinance we did state, the council did state, that should any property in a voluntary district seek tax credit for the improvements that they're making on the historic home, and they voluntarily come to the Historic District Commission and get review and approval, they could seek tax credit, but if they did receive tax credit, that property would essentially become a regulated property in perpetuity.
Right, okay.
So that was one.
But relative to this, since it's town-owned land,
right,
that's not applying.
We don't have to worry about paying
Relative
taxes.
to this, you're suggesting, bottom line, that it's possible to regulate the buildings.
Yeah.
And possibly designate the entire lot as voluntary.
Correct.
In which case, Parks and Rec Department could, if they wanted to build a court on the open space, they could come to HDC and get input, but they don't have to.
They don't have to.
But if we designated the 4 buildings as regulated, any exterior improvements or alterations, they'd have to come.
Right, and they couldn't be demolished
And they
without
couldn't.
approval of the Historic District.
Now, would the designation of the buildings, let's go that way that we're doing, would that encompass some envelope of land around each of those buildings?
It could. If you look at the next page, you know, the sample language I gave you, I did not incorporate any reference to that. That would take a little bit more.
This is on page 2.
Yeah, on page 2. It would take a little more finesse. So the first paragraph just shows that we would add the camp to the listing of the designated districts. But the second paragraph, the language not highlighted is currently in the ordinance, which says, it is the intent of this section that historic property owned by the town of Narragansett, oh, I already told you that, shall not be exempt. That language already exists.
Right.
Then I put in the comma and say, with the exception that the camp be designated as a hybrid regulated voluntary district in which the regulatory provisions of this section are limited to application to the 4 existing structures on site as of March 2023. Any alterations proposed to the remainder of the site shall be addressed under the voluntary provisions of section 5, as you have so.
But you think we could incorporate some land around each of the 4 buildings that would essentially, any alteration within that land would require going to HDC?
We could suggest that. I'd have to revamp that language a little bit, but we could do that.
But is it needed? Do you need it?
It would. What it would do would be to. Yeah. It's a good idea, actually, Mr. Chairman, because if we wanted to build any additions on any of the buildings, as drafted right here, as soon as you step out of the building, you're not in the regulated space.
You can do whatever you want.
So we could draft some language about a minimum of 10 feet around each building, plus any extended area that would encompass additions to the building. Or we could just say any addition to the building would be regulated with or without any spatial designation.
So you know that the concern raised last time was there are historic buildings on there. There are some, maybe the camp building, built in the 80s,
Yeah.
not really historic or architecturally significant. I think the log cabin is. I think
Yeah.
the building that houses Michelle's offices is an old home from the 30s.
Mhm.
It's not particularly architecturally significant, but it's an old home, and then of course the windmill has to be protected. So the idea was, but do we want to designate the entire lot, which may, and I know we went into a big debate last time, but there are situations where Parks and Rec's latitude to do things for recreation might be delayed or inhibited by going
Yeah.
to HDC on the land, for example, building another basketball court. I mean,
I made the point last time, though, that because this historical use has been recreational, that building more recreation on the site should not be seen as, from the use standpoint, as violating the historic district regulations.
but it might have to go to HDC.
But any structure, if we just designate the entire parcel, any structure that's proposed on the site, addition or new structure, would go to HDC
Right.
for review.
And we don't know whether it's the council, the planning board, the zoning board, or HDC, what the makeup of that board's gonna be in the future, and there might be certain ones that wanna prohibit any kind of use there. I mean, we don't
Well,
know.
The standards and guidelines are very specific about what they do regularly. And
But if there's parcels of that property that they don't have, that they could voluntarily seek input but don't have to, then they would have the latitude to
Put a court.
do what they want
Do what they need.
recreational.
What they need to.
yeah, I made the argument last time that I don't think that's a big issue, but I know that many of the members of the board felt
Okay.
differently.
So,
So we'll take that.
Mr. Brady?
as a
Yeah,
second.
and again, I was absent for this, so I apologize, and this may have been brought up before. This is defined for the camp. It just strikes me that an ordinance like this, or an addition to the ordinance, would be beneficial for the town. Do we want to narrow this verbiage down so it is only for the camp, and then if you have something else, you have to come in with another addendum to this, or do we want to create something that's a tool that can be used rationally throughout the town?
You mean this hybrid language that
Yeah.
Mr. DeLucas put in here?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can
Well-
modify that.
Without having to create a subsection, 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 subsection 3.
Well,
You know,
we-
something tailored to each one. You'll have a tool in place that you can use universally where it makes sense.
Well, you still have to, the way the law is written, you have to pass by ordinance a map, an approval of a map of an area
That's
that
right.
you're gonna designate as a regulated
Yeah.
area.
Yep.
So it's
forgot about
not, it's not that fluid as,
Yeah, I forgot about that.
say, an overlay. But it is an overlay, but it,
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
and we do already define voluntary and regulated
Right.
in the existing ordinance.
So the new thing would be a hybrid.
The new thing would be mixing the two.
But,
We already have two districts that had hybrid, in the sense that Central had hybrid and Ocean Road had hybrid. Certain sections were, that they were entire lots. Certain sections were voluntary and certain sections were regulated. Now we're talking about mixing
One
that
lot.
all on a single parcel.
Well, because
which we haven't done yet.
I could see this if you had a commercial type situation where you want to do something similar.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of rational usage for something like this. I think this is pretty innovative.
so, right, and we're just talking about this because HDC wants to make this entire parcel part of the historic district.
That's what they've recommended.
That's where we are. Joe, did you have?
Yeah, my answer is no. I think this is a recreational area, and I understand the importance of the windmill and maybe some of those other structures, but this is a recreational area to encumber these people. So far, at this point in time, anybody I know has approached the Historic District Commission has been very satisfied and very happy with their, with their.
It's been a very successful.
Yeah, but that can change, and we're of enough gray hair here to know in other communities it is not looked on as a cooperative, how can we help you committee. It's the opposite. So If this, we don't have that much land in town that's designated for recreational usage. There's got to be a way to do a hybrid here to preserve the windmill and perhaps some of these other old buildings, but I wouldn't encumber the recreation department if they want to, I mean, there's a lot of land there, you know, put a basketball court there or so. I mean, or I mentioned the crummy looking, I shouldn't say that, the square box, put a squash court or whatever up, is certainly not appealing as a building, but very useful for recreation.
If we have a voluntary absent the buildings, if it's voluntary, Parks and Rec doesn't even have to go to HDC.
Right.
So the choice is, do you make all that land voluntary or you just don't designate it at all? Doesn't, seems to me that you have the same outcome. If you designate it voluntary, it doesn't put any burden on them.
No, no burden at all.
But except they could avail themselves of the HDC's opinion if they wanted to.
And let me say this.
And they don't get a tax break because they're not paying taxes.
Yeah, we know that. The HDC, you know, we've been kind of running over that concept of getting HDC advice and guidance. And I've been with it, at it with them since January 2011. And there have been, I won't say a ton of times, but half dozen or more times where people have come in with ideas or proposals. And they were either way over designed or way over ambitious. And the board actually brought them back and said, you know, you don't necessarily need to do this, 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 and this. Saved them lots of time and lots of money. There have been a couple of advisories that have come in where the people came in and said, we're not sure really what we want to do with this. You know, we've done a little homework on this building, but we don't know really where to take it. If they might have been wanting to build an addition or change the way a porch looked or something. And the capabilities of those board members has shown itself in the kinds of advice, very valuable advice that's been given to them.
Mike,
so I'm very proud of them for that.
Do you sense any opposition from Ms. Kershaw or town staff, either way that we go?
Not from Ms. Kershaw, I've already spoken with her.
Anybody else have any comments?
I mean, my perspective is that the importance of the land around the buildings is protecting the context of the building, so that you don't put something up that is just, you know, put up whatever.
A basketball court.
Well, you know, I'm thinking a new building next to the windmill that really loses the context of the landscape of the windmill. So that's the value I see of doing it. If you're just protecting the facade of the buildings, why not just do a facade easement? I don't know.
Well, I like the envelope around each building for that very reason as well.
I think that makes sense.
And then the rest voluntary, I don't know.
And there's a couple of structures next to the old, I don't know, the log cabin building. There are a couple of structures that are stone that seem like about the same era too.
They are.
Yeah.
We actually, Joe and I walked it the other day. The log cabin is actually what you can rent.
Yeah.
And then that stone, that cinder block structure with the old stone chimney, or the old cinder block chimney, is storage, I think. And then the back building, the camp building, is for the summer camp. And I guess, when did we buy it from Jory, from Camp Jory?
2001.
So that was built in the 80s. That back, so the Jewish camp Jory used that.
The big building?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For their thing. So I think Dr. O'Neill would like to say something if we could. Doctor, do you want to get up? Well, we're on YouTube. I think if you could stand up there.
Are you?
Yeah.
Sure, I can use that?
Sure. Your fans await you.
Mike may or may not be aware in his conversations with Sarah's earlier, but Peter Borgemeister, who is a respected and recognized restoration architect, he's the individual that we hired when we decided, wisely or unwisely, to restore the building. And in any case, with the proposals that we were making and a wonderful set of designs, he actually presented to Sarah Zurier and Jeff Emity, who wasn't the full-time director at the time, but be that as it may. And in the presentation, what he suggested and what they affirmed in the way of conversation was that the green space in front of it is a really ideal complementary area relating to the window. So that was their opinion. We didn't get it in writing, but their thought being that to have some other construction there willy-nilly, you know, you're depending upon what entity? Well, you know, just as you folks are changing in a few years, and I'm sure Mike is changing, and the town council is changing, and Parks and Rec is changing. Having something in the way of a guideline which is immutable, if you will, in the sense that whatever else and what other changes there are, that the constant is that at least the alterations in that green space would be subject to the review of the Historic District Commission. Now, my brother points out if you are in Newport, you don't want to go before the Historic District Commission. Wickford, so. But in any case, at least it's only really an advisory body, is that, you know, it's not as if they have real legal authority. I sat on this zoning board, I sat on the zoning board in North Kingstown, and in fact, when the Historic District Commission in Wickford decided on things, repeatedly it came before us as a zoning board because we were then the backdrop, we were the review board to go ahead. And very frequently, they were overruled. What I guess I'm saying is that the purpose of having something in place is that you can't just go ahead and do things. When anything is voluntary, I would say more likely than not, if it's uncomfortable or difficult, people are not going to go ahead and do things on a voluntary basis. Why would they? I mean, that's human nature. In any case, is it that, just by way of history too, and you may or may not know, the town had appropriated $26,800 and had a contract with George Sherman Construction to take the building down, is that they were going to demolish it. And what happened was we needed a space. We decided that we would love to have that. It has some history. And just to go back so that you understand as well, these structures is that the property was acquired from descendants of the Clark family. That's why you have Clark Road. Clark Road became Road in 1886. In 1830, there was a little road driveway that came in from Point Judith Road. And at that time, that was indeed part of Clark Farm. Historically, the farms went from Salt Pond to the ocean. That's where all of the cattle were raised, the cows are raised. Narragansett was famous for its cheese. Narragansett was famous for the Narragansett Pacers that George Washington rode on, and maybe Paul Revere. In any case, is that the issue is partially can we save things. The original farmhouse for Clark Farm was demolished, as pointed out to me. If you're, you know where the condos are that are
right across
opposite
the
where
street.
windmill.
Yep.
There was a wonderful, very, very old farmhouse that the town just decided to demolish.
Yeah, we looked at that.
And, you know, the stories here in Narragansett are terrible, is that if you look up, everybody remember Anawan Farm?
Yeah.
Okay, is that you saw what happened to that wonderful colonial old structure. Oh, it's too difficult to repair, whatever else. Also, the blacksmiths, they could have at least left the blacksmiths. Well, Friday night, all of a sudden, no historic districts at that time. Has that gone? Everything is leveled. There's a big house there. It's a nice looking house. But I just hope that everybody kind of thinks here, even like, for instance, we're talking about the camp. That camp is a really special entity. That was the Jewish orphans of Rhode Island.
Right.
Their original structure, their home, was where Miriam Hospital was. That structure that was there, these were really Jewish orphans. And after the Second World War, they were actually European Jewish orphans. And to buy that property, they had to do and use a straw man. Do we know what a straw man is?
Yeah.
No one would sell the Jews. A Christian, a Goyim, had to go pay $1, and then he sold it to the Jewish people. Even that camp, and now it's over on
Warden's Pond.
Warden's Pond, and it's beautiful. But that's where Camp Jury was.
Right.
And I guess I'm sort of going around things because you talk about the history of it, is that, but having that green space as a complementary space, particularly to the windmill, kids are still going to use it for sleigh riding. Michelle had it set up, they were going to have balloon rides out of there, but the winds were such they couldn't. Having that just be part of a historic district, when all a historic district can do is to give advice. It doesn't have legal authority, and the zoning board is the place where you can present yourself and say the historic district is being too strict. I don't think that that's such an encumbrance on the town, because, you know, we're a community, and we're not Newport. And I just hope that since we've taken a derelict that was going to be knocked down, destroyed, and we're well over $400,000 restoring that. And if we leave, the town will have an absolutely beautiful structure. We only have a 50-year lease, we pay $1 a year. That green space is really a lovely contributing factor, which is how Mr. Borgermeister presented to Mr. Ennedy and Sarah Zurier, is that it's not such an encumbrance to have the historic district review that. I just don't believe it is.
Okay.
That, not when you've got the backdrop of the zoning board to go ahead and make your presentation and say that's too much of a restriction. Even if that was a national historic structure, our house was on Ocean Road. It only prevents the feds from running a highway through it.
Yeah.
They're really, it's a very limited impact that all these designations have. But one other little thing, by the way, why we're so interested in having this, it makes a huge difference in terms of getting grants for historic structures if you have a designation, even by the state, doesn't have to be national. So if we go forward with this, and again, we have all kinds of paperwork up there with Sarah and Jeff, is that if we get the town designation of this as a historic district, it qualifies us for a myriad number of financial supports, and obviously we want to be self-supporting. So
Okay.
a little selfish, but in any case.
Thank you, Doctor, appreciate it. And the conversation's going, and I think most of the board wants to recommend protection of the buildings and maybe some surrounding land. So that would play into, if it was designated, even though it's hybrid, it would still make them eligible for the grants that they seek by protecting it, rather than just the entire lot being protected. I mean, I think that's what we're coming down to. Do we designate the entire lot as part of the historic zone?
Well, let's just, you know, I appreciate everything Dr. O'Neill said. Just a couple things. If we designate the site as a hybrid site, but it's a designated historic district, it's a designated historic district. The fact that its qualities are different from
the standard that we're used to in the
Okay.
other 6 districts, I don't think makes a lot of difference. Whether it makes a lot of difference to the funding agencies that he alludes to, I can't answer that. None of us can. But if it's a district, it's a district. Earl's Court is a district. It's a district in town. There isn't a single regulated property on the Earl's Court district, but it's a district.
But there would be on this.
This would be a hybrid where
The buildings
would be designated.
And maybe the land around each building.
Maybe the land around each building. I would be very happy to sit with Dr. O'Neill and talk about designating a certain amount of land area around the windmill itself. That we could take it, we could take the 4 buildings and actually do a description of each one.
Well, let me interrupt you, because where I'm going is for you to go back potentially and take that suggestion about some land envelope around each of the 4 buildings
Yep.
and make some recommendation back to us.
Solid recommendation.
And not hammer it out here, because we don't,
No.
you gotta have time to think about what you think's appropriate. But it would protect the land and the building, to Mr. Friday's point about putting something up, Parks and Rec wanted to put up something in close proximity, that would detract from the historical nature of the building. If we have an envelope of land around each one, then it wouldn't be allowed, or it would have to go, Scott, it would have to go through the HDC. So that's what I would suggest.
My only concern is that the council has this on their agenda.
They could just continue their public hearing.
No, well, no, we've already advertised it twice. If it doesn't get opened, if the hearing doesn't get opened, it has to be advertised again.
Which is a newspaper ad.
Yeah. Yep. So, just saying that, I don't know, and following that up with,
Yeah, I'd rather do that, I mean, because I think people want to see what the land envelope is, if that's the way the board's going.
yeah.
That's the way the board's going.
Okay.
And we could sit here arbitrarily and say,
Yeah.
10 feet, 15
I don't
feet,
wanna
20
do
feet.
that.
I want somebody to come back and say, look, we went out there, we looked, this is rational.
Well, that's that's where
'Cause I
we
think
would
the
look to you for your expertise. If you
Yeah,
want to consult with the Historical Society or others, that's great.
Well, I would, I think what we do is we go out there and actually look at the site.
Right.
And take maybe a measuring wheel. I know Parks and Recreation has a measuring wheel right in the office.
I got
So we
two.
could actually do that. And
Well,
each
that-
one of the buildings could have its own set of requirements.
Right.
Unique to its environment.
Because to Dr. O'Neill's
Context.
point, this Dr. O'Neill, not this Dr. O'Neill. I drove by Anawan Farm the next day after it was knocked down, and I remember you and I had the conversation. I think we might have had historic districts at the point, but we had
did.
never designated that property
Right.
as a single one.
Even though the state had recognized that
Yeah.
as a significant primary.
And we had designated Sunset Farm as an individual historic site,
It is.
not just a district with a number of private homes. But we didn't do Anawan Farm, and some of us kick ourselves to this day for not doing that, right? And so, I just, I think in this case, it allows Parks and Rec to maybe have some latitude over what they do on that property with programming and other things, but it also protects the building and the land around it. If you come back, in my opinion, if the board agrees with something, and I'll talk to the council president about extending it again, I don't have a problem with that. Mr.
We
Mayor.
can do it. I know where you're taking it, and I can foresee
Alright.
the process we'd undertake to bring you some more materials.
Mr. Brady?
We'd map each one of those areas we showed to blow up on the screen.
Yeah,
With dimensions on it and all that.
Michael knows what to do. Do you have
Yes, what I'm hearing from everybody, correct me if I'm wrong, is we applaud this idea. And we just want something specific that we can wrap our hands around.
Yeah, actually, you're not hearing that from everybody. I believe the person next to you, you're not hearing
No, Dr. O'Neill does want to protect, you say, one or more of the buildings.
Yeah, I said that to begin with.
Right.
Certainly the structure we're talking about, the windmill, but certainly the other structures that are also of age, that are deemed to be historic.
So Mike,
should be
in
protected.
You don't wanna over-encumber.
in the lease that was signed, there looks like there was a survey done.
just a survey of the entire lot, or just the area?
Yeah,
around
so
the
there's
window?
two, yeah,
Okay.
I mean,
I haven't had a chance to read it. You gave it to me when?
yeah, so engineering.
This is a lease between the town and the Historical Society for the
Yeah,
window
so there's
building?
Exhibit A and Exhibit B.
Okay.
So I don't know, I mean, there was some town work
I'll take a look at
back in 2020, so maybe, well, the only reason I'm bringing that up is if you're gonna
it. Yeah.
do the envelopes, it looks like there's stuff.
So let me ask Joe,
sitting around.
are you okay with protecting the 4 buildings, if that's what the board says, and some land around each
I've
one?
said that over and over again.
Okay.
I don't have any problem with that. My problem is taking this entire parcel somehow out of the hands of recreation in terms of the air, because it's designated that now. For us to go the other way,
I think this is a good compromise.
it is. No.
Yeah.
I support it.
All right. So can we send Mike back with that charge?
Yeah, let's do that.
Sounds like a plan.
So move.
So we want to continue with that, and do you want me to contact the council president on this one?
It would be helpful.
Very close.
I have a sense of what's in there.
No, I'll tell her we haven't come, because I think Mr. Brady's point is correct. Why rush to that?
Do it right.
Just to not advertise again. I mean, when we think this is a more appropriate, if the whole board feels this way.
It's certainly important.
Okay, so I motion to continue from someone?
So move.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Neal, second by Mr. Brady, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Dr. Neal, for coming out and giving us that information. Mike, is this last one a quick item, do you know?
Yeah, I just wanted
Reports
to,
from the staff board, Main Street grants, discussion only, we're not taking any action on this.
no, but you will see this replicated on your agenda for next Tuesday. The town manager has asked several of the departments of the town to consider submitting grant applications to the state's Main Street program. And the state's Main Street program has 2 different subsets. One is an infrastructure component, and the other has to do with planning and other support, including surveys and educational components. So what's difficult, although my boss isn't here, but maybe he's watching, so I shouldn't say it's difficult. What's challenging is that our deadline is next Wednesday. So we have to get these applications done and in right away. Jill has taken on 2, I've taken on 3. Department heads in other departments have taken on 3 or 4 others. And so the areas that we're encompassing, and I should have brought the Main Street material so I could have read that to you a little bit. But it's intended to be supportive of, primarily the Main Street program is intended to be supportive of central business district improvements, business areas, commercial areas. But it does have this other subset about education and other planning related and zoning related projects. So I just wanted to inform you of the projects that we're working on. And I'm going to be bringing one to you on Tuesday next week, asking that you agree, vote, and approve signing, that the chair could sign a letter of support for it. So let me just go over that really quick.
Well, are you gonna bring it next meeting?
Yeah.
So do you wanna present it then?
Yeah, I just want to tell you the things we're working on. We're working on something that I think you're going to find really interesting, and that is training of all the boards of town. You guys know that you have to have training. Some of you have been involved in this for quite some time. None of the other boards have any requirements at all. So one of the applications we're going to submit is to get a grant to hire a consulting firm to train every board, every standing board, not the ad hocs, but every standing board in town on Open Meetings Act, Robert's Rules of Order, you know, the things that are really key. And then also to have at least one module of information or education about what they do. So the pension board should get a 2-hour module on what pension boards are to do. The tax assessment board of review, same thing. So that's an application I think is going to be really good, and I have a sense that's going to get approved. Second one has to do with hiring a consultant to do the short-term rental regulation ordinance. Knowing that last night the town council came to a 2-2 loggerhead decision on whether or not to do this ordinance at all, we're still going to do the study if we can get the grant.
Mike, do you need decisions on this on the 28th?
Just on one of them.
On which one?
I'm bringing the short-term rental regulation request to you folks, asking that you would support us hiring a consultant to do a short-term rental regulation.
I'm okay with that.
Period.
Period.
That's it.
That's the only one.
And it has to be, that decision has to be made on the 28th.
Right.
Okay. I'd suggest we put that at the beginning of the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we're gonna have a meeting that's gonna last all night.
Yep.
So I don't wanna kick that to the end and have everybody walk out and not do it. So if
This
it's
is-
that short, put it on the beginning.
All this is asking for your support for us to go and apply
Okay.
for a grant.
Let's do it.
Go for it.
So, just going to tell you a few other things. Linear park, you're all aware of the linear park. To get a $425,000 grant to do phase 1 of the linear park. The urban renewal zone, I think this was Jill's idea, which was a great, or was it yours, Steve?
Someone at that table.
Some intelligent human being
For
over there.
those of you who
My
had to
idea.
read the urban renewal regulation, the only way that you can understand what regulations are in play is to read the entire thing and all 13, or I think it's up to 16 amendments of it, because they were never codified as a single ordinance. So Jill has drafted an application to hire someone to put it all together into one single ordinance. Jill, talk about the trails one, because I'm not going to be able to articulate it the way that
Sure.
you did.
So the Land Trust is putting together a bigger picture Gansett trails. So very quickly the trail system will go, it's partially on trail, partially on road, from Kenosha Farms all the way to Sunset Farm. And it's pretty comprehensive. It does, I think it's over 5 miles
5
long.
miles. Yeah.
Right, so the grant that I wrote will actually provide a wayfinding system throughout the trail system, but as it gets into the center of town, it'll serve 2 other purposes. It'll be a historical kiosk incorporating old historic photos of the old Narragansett Town Center, the casino areas. And what I'd like to do is incorporate as part of that, and it doesn't require a lot, except for a little bit of research to find out the detail, is to incorporate historic flood information. And if we do that,
With the markers.
with the markers, real
Yeah.
simple,
Cool,
yep,
cool.
where the flood was in 39 and 54 and Superstorm Sandy, whatever information we can find and provide, then it actually provides us additional points for our community rating system, which, as you know, provides a benefit for everyone who has an insurance policy in the special flood hazard area. So ultimately, my ultimate goal is to get us to a 20% discount. We're at 15 now.
Nice.
2 more things not being.
Mike, I just want to remind you, we're down to 5 viewers,
Yeah, you've lost
which is
50% of the audience.
me and Dan and 2. So there's actually 3 people watching. So
I'm hoping that's one of them is my wife.
That's not really common tonight.
2 more things. One is Parks and Recreation is going to put in a grant application to improve the Pettiquamskit neighborhood playground. That's a cool thing. And DPW is putting in one that's going to be really cool, which is to create a gateway center component. I don't know what to say. An improvement in the intersection in front of the post office, and to actually put in the intersection on the ground a giant symbol of the town of Narragansett, which will be the N that you see on the 50-yard line out at the football field, and to also add pedestrian and public enhancements along that roadway to reinforce that this is the gateway to the center of the town, the Pier Village, and that it is a place. I have added to that, I think you guys will like this part, I have added to that what we ought to do is run this idea, this symbol that we're going to use, it is the Narragansett School Department symbol, into panels that would be located sporadically, maybe every couple hundred feet, into the sidewalks, all the way up Kingstown Road to Boone Street, all the way up Boone Street past this business area, and all the way down Convent Street. So that the public is aware that this is the gateway of town is not just Pier Village, but it's the commercial area related to it, just 3 blocks away in Boone Street. So that's a really exciting proposal to see. You know, I also wanted to add to that, but I was talked out of it. Historical lighting and taking down all the wires in the Boone Street section, but we were afraid that might be time visions. That's all I had.
Very good.
Awesome.
So, okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Seconded,
Motion by
non-debatable.
Mr. Burnett, seconded by Mr. Brady, all's in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.